Chapter 273. Hee, it's fine. Waving his hands, Zhangqiu Jianqiong suddenly burst into laughter and stopped Wang Zhen, so Wang Gongzi is interested in military affairs as well. But then again, how could the younger brother of a general not be interested? It'll only benefit him in the future. As expected of a protector general, Zhangqiu Jianqiong managed to resolve the awkwardness with a wave of his hand. Hee, that's right. I've interacted with Wang Gongzi a few times, and he is indeed interested in military affairs. It's rare for me to meet Lord Zhangqiu here, so I knew that he wouldn't let this opportunity slip by. Ha. Yang Zhao reacted swiftly and tried to mediate the situation. Upon hearing Zhangqiu Jianqiong's words and Yang Zhao's agreement, the atmosphere in the banquet eased up once more. The generals of the Annan Protectorate who had been rather dissatisfied with Wang Chong nodded, accepting this explanation. Wang Chong's father, Wang Yan, and his elder brother, Wang Fu, were both commanders in the military, so it was only natural for them to be interested in military affairs. As one of the few protector generals of the empire, it was only natural for Lord Zhangqiu to seek his guidance. Hee, Wang Gongzi has lived in the capital for a long time, so it's normal for you to be unfamiliar with military affairs. Uzan is located on a plateau, and the journey south to Jiannan is long and treacherous, so it won't be easy. Furthermore, Uzan has never been to the mainland before, so they aren't familiar with the terrain. Unless someone guides them, it's impossible for them to gain anything. However, the Uzan people have a red face, which is completely different from us Tang people. Any spy would be able to tell with a glance. Furthermore, the Uzan people who enter Jiannan are under strict surveillance. Other than the Tea-Horse Road, the other cities on the mainland are strictly forbidden from entering. Besides, Uzan is a sparsely populated place, so it's difficult for news to spread. To put it bluntly, only you and I know that we have entered the capital, but the Uzan people might not know about it. Zhangqiu Jianqiong stretched out a finger and wagged it at Wang Chong with a smile. Roar! The commanders around him burst into laughter. As the elite generals of Annan, they knew the Uzan people better than anyone else. Wang Chong didn't say anything. His brows furrowed even more, and the worry in his heart deepened. Of course, we are not hoping for the enemy to make a mistake. I have managed the Annan Protectorate Manor for more than 10 years, and it has long since become an impregnable fortress. Moreover, all the rules and regulations have been fully restored. Even if I am not there, it can still operate normally. Moreover, there are still the 180,000 elite soldiers that I have painstakingly trained. Even if the people of Uzan come south, what is there to be afraid of? Zhangqiu Jianqiong harumphed coldly. His eyes were filled with disdain, and his expression was one of unparalleled arrogance. As the Southern Protector General, one of the few top-notch commanders of the empire, it was impossible for him to reach this position without some ability. Southern border had not been at war for more than 10 years, it was not because of geography, and even more not because of luck. It was strength. There were no weak soldiers under a strong general, and he, Zhangqiu Jianqiong, had no weak soldiers under him. The 180,000 elite soldiers were the greatest guarantee of the empire's southern border. To think that even Zhangqiu Jianqiong would be the same. Hearing Zhangqiu Jianqiong's words, Wang Chong felt an indescribable feeling in his heart. There was no doubt that Zhangqiu Jianqiong was a qualified commander. Jiannan wasn't as peaceful as it had been all along. The peace that he had enjoyed over the past decade wasn't a coincidence, but the result of Zhangqiu Jianqiong's meticulous training. With a complete system, a large army, and countless experienced commanders, Zhangqiu Jianqiong was no ordinary commander. He was definitely qualified to be a commander. But not even Zhangqiu Jianqiong could have imagined that the calamity of the southwest and the northwest would start from the Annan Protectorate Manor that he had suppressed. All 180,000 elites would perish in battle. Zhangqiu Jianqiong's Annan Protectorate Manor would become the first protectorate in the history of the empire to be disbanded due to a crushing defeat. Life comes from hardship, and death comes from ease. Even the Annan Protector General, Zhangqiu Jianqiong, harbored such a careless mentality, let alone Xian Yu Zhongtong, who had been influenced by him. I was intending to keep Zhangqiu Jianqiong in Jiannan, but from the looks of it now, even if you were to remain there, it would still be unavoidable. Wang Chang's heart was agitated, and an indescribable sorrow welled up in him. When Zhangqiu Jianqiong said these words, there was a hint of pride in his voice. Wang Chong could sense that Zhangqiu Jianqiong was extremely confident in his plans in Annan. But it was precisely because of this that Wang Chong felt an inexplicable sense of sorrow. That tragedy in the southwest. Wang Chong had always thought that it was just a coincidence that could be easily changed. But it was only now that Wang Chong realized something. Regardless of whether it was Zhangqiu Jianqiong or Xian Yu Zhongtong, no matter who was in power, this tragedy was unavoidable. The Tang dynasty had been peaceful for too long, and their arrogance had not only seeped into the royal court, but also into the military. Lord, have you ever thought about what would happen if Uzun and Meng Shizhao were to work together? Wang Chong suddenly asked. As soon as those words were spoken, the proud and smiling Zhangqiu Jianqiong's face abruptly warped. The entire room fell silent, to the point that one could hear a pin drop. The generals of Annan glared at Wang Chong with rage in their eyes. Wang Chong's words might have been a joke to him, but to the generals of Annan, there were countless comrades and even their families and children there. It was the place where they belonged for the rest of their lives. Wang Chong's joke wasn't funny at all. Isn't Wang Gongzi going a little overboard? The middle-aged scholar beside Zhangqiu Jianqiong stroked his mustache and said. Hee, Wang Gongzi, it's fine if you don't go overboard. Let's eat. Let's eat. Yang Zhao hurriedly tried to mediate the situation. He was perplexed. This sworn brother of his had always been a playboy with an outstanding disposition. But for some reason, he felt as though he had turned into a completely different person, asking about such sensitive matters. He was intending to matchmake Zhangqiu Jianqiong with the Wang clan, a clan of ministers and generals in the capital. However, if this were to continue, the banquet might not be able to proceed any further, and everyone ended up parting on bad terms. Meng Shizhao has just swept through Irai and conquered the other 5 Zhao kingdoms. King Zheluofeng is in high spirits and is at the peak of his ambitions. I heard that the Great Tang's decree, Meng Shizhao, is about to launch an attack. On the other hand, Uzun is currently building up his army, training a large number of cavalrymen, and purchasing steel. He has already amassed a force of 300,000 cavalrymen. Building up his army and expanding his army? If he doesn't have any ulterior motives, why would he do so? Annan is situated in the crevice between Uzun and Meng Shizhao, and both sides are countries of tigers and wolves. If the two sides were to ally with one another, have you thought about what will happen to Annan? Wang Chong stared at the other party and asked. Even before the renowned Protector General of Annan, Wang Chong didn't back down in the slightest. Annan's affairs concerned the lives of 180,000 elites and countless civilians. Even if he were to risk incurring Zhangqiu Jianqiong's wrath, there were some things that he had to say and do. In the current Annan Protectorate manner, from the Protector General Zhangqiu Jianqiong to the ordinary soldiers, no one had the slightest awareness of danger. At this moment, there had to be a person, a voice, to warn them. Otherwise, if tragedy were to befall them, it would be too late. Wang Chong was glad that he had met Yang Zhao on the streets outside the Blue Bottle Pavilion. It was also because of Yang Zhao that he had obtained this opportunity. The reason why he had rushed to this banquet instead of cultivating on the spirit vein wasn't to curry favor with Protector General Zhangqiu Jianqiong, nor was it to rope in the generals of Annan. Rather, it was for this opportunity, an opportunity to speak before the generals of Annan. Even if he were to incur Zhangqiu Jianqiong's hatred, it didn't matter to him. Chong-er. Wang Zhen glanced at his nephew, and a hint of worry flashed across his eyes. Before this banquet, he did warn Wang Chong not to get too close to them, lest he brought trouble upon himself. But now, Wang Chong was standing on the opposite side of Zhangqiu Jianqiong. Wang Zhen wasn't worried about Zhangqiu Jianqiong. After all, he had come from a clan of generals and ministers for several generations. Even if Zhangqiu Jianqiong had some grudges against him, he wouldn't be able to do anything to the Wang clan. What Wang Zhen was worried about was Wang Chong. He could sense that there was something amiss with Wang Chong at the moment. "Brat, what nonsense are you spouting? Is this how you speak to an adult? Don't think that you're Duke Zhou's descendant. Don't go overboard." At the banquet, the generals of the Annan Protectorate Manor couldn't hold themselves back any longer. Their faces darkened, and they looked incredibly awful. It should have been a joyous occasion for the Protector General to invite them to a banquet out of goodwill. Yet, this young master of the Wang clan didn't know what was good for him. It was one thing for him to say that Uzun would launch an attack at any time, but now, he was saying that Uzun and Meng Shizhao would work together to attack the Annan Protectorate Manor. This was too much. Were they thinking that the Annan Protectorate Manor was too peaceful? "Lord Wang, we respect you as an influential official of the royal court, but what do you mean by this? Are you trying to humiliate Lord Wang?" Wang Chong was too young, and it wasn't appropriate for them to get angry with him. Thus, many of them vented their frustrations on Wang General. Those who didn't know what was going on might even think that it was Wang Zhen's doing. "Shut your mouths." At that moment, Zhangqiu Jianqiong's expression turned cold. He raised a few fingers and shouted at his subordinates to stop. As the Annan Protector General, he couldn't possibly be so magnanimous. Contrary to everyone's expectations, not only did Zhangqiu Jianqiong not get angry, he even had a contemplative look on his face. Initially, Zhangqiu Jianqiong thought that the lad before him was intentionally making a fuss. But when he heard the latter half of Wang Chong's words, he didn't get angry at all. Because what Wang Chong said was the truth. His spies had just received intelligence that the 7th Emperor of the Uzun Empire was currently training his troops by the Qinghai Lake, recruiting the herdsmen and training the cavalry. On the other hand, Meng Shizhao's Jelifeng was indeed growing more and more arrogant and disrespectful toward the Tang dynasty. This was something he could sense more clearly than anyone else. Meng Shizhao was a vassal state of the Tang dynasty. In the past, Jelifeng still had some respect for him. But now, there were many orders that even he couldn't carry out anymore. He was only pretending to obey them. The latest news he received was that Jelifeng had just dismissed the prime minister and other officials who were close to the Tang dynasty in Meng Shizhao, and he had recently promoted a few youths and warmongers from Meng Shizhao. This wasn't good news for the Annan Protectorate Manor. It was clear that Meng Shizhao and the Uzun Empire were disloyal to the Tang dynasty. However, it just so happened that Zhangqiu Jianqiong wanted to enter the Bureau of Military Personnel, and he wanted to leave this matter to his successor. Yet, he didn't expect a 15-year-old lad from the Wang clan to expose this matter before him. Has the Wang clan's intelligence network reached such a level? In that instant, Zhangqiu Jianqiong shot a deep glance at Wang Chong as countless thoughts flashed across his mind. A moment later, Zhangqiu Jianqiong's gaze fell on Wang Zhen, who was standing beside Wang Chong. In his heart, Zhangqiu Jianqiong still found it hard to believe that the words he had just spoken were the idea of a young lad like Wang Chong. In the depths of his heart, Zhangqiu Jianqiong was more willing to believe that it was Wang Zhen's idea. Wang Zhen's silence further confirmed his conjecture. Wang Zhen is an influential official of the royal court, and he has the right to enter the royal palace to meet with the emperor. For him to say those words through the mouth of his nephew, it can't be without reason. Could it be that this is the will of the holy emperor? Zhangqiu Jianqiong thought. What he didn't know was that he had guessed wrongly. All of this was Wang Chong's own idea. Wang Zhen's trust in this nephew of his had reached a level that made one's hair stand on end. It wasn't just him, the king of Song was the same as well. Thus, even though he didn't know why Wang Chong would do such a thing, once Wang Chong did something, neither Wang Zhen nor the king of Song would stop him. Because they knew that this child would never do something without a motive. Chapter 274. Thinking that Wang Chong's words came from Wang Zhen, Zhangqiu Jianqiong dared not let his guard down. Chong Gongzi is astute and eager to learn. Coming from a clan of ministers and generals, it's a good thing for you to have such thoughts. Don't think too much into it. Zhangqiu Jianqiong waved his hand, first stopping his subordinates, and then he turned to Wang Chong with a faint smile, his expression brimming with vigor. Meng Shizhao and Uzun aren't the first geniuses to appear in the empire, but does Chong Gongzi know that the situation you speak of has never happened before? Meng Shizhao and Uzun are from the Urai and the Highlands respectively. They are of different languages, races, and even their skin colors are different. Furthermore, our Central Plains Tang dynasty is like a sharp knife that separates them. From the start to the end, the two countries have never had the chance to interact with one another, needless to say, ally with one another. The hearts of men are filled with suspicion. Even two hands are unable to coordinate with one another, needless to say, two empires. Furthermore, with such a massive army, who will command whom? Who will be the leader and who will be the subordinate? Chong Gongzi has never been on the battlefield, so it's understandable that you aren't aware of the affairs of the military. Zhangqiu Jianqiong tapped his index finger lightly on the table. As the Southern Protector General, he couldn't be any more familiar with Uzun and Meng Shizhao. If Uzun and Meng Shizhao intend to attack the Central Plains together, they must mobilize at least 200,000 soldiers each. How are they going to command an army of 400,000? What's the timing? How are they going to mobilize and coordinate their movements? Chong Gongzi, you're still young, so don't underestimate these matters. An army of several 100,000 isn't just a few hundred or a few thousand. How can they be mobilized so easily? Besides, even if they were to ally with one another, with 100,000 elites and a city at their back, wouldn't they be able to fend off their attack? As long as they can stall for some time and wait for the army of the royal court to arrive, no matter how many soldiers they have, they will still be reduced to ashes. Putting everything else aside, the army closest to Jiannan is the Big Dipper army of Longxi. This was an army established by great General Wang Zhongxi. Even though Geshu Han was the new commander-in-chief, the Big Dipper army was made up of Han men. The Big Dipper army has accumulated plenty of experience in dealing with Uzun's cavalry. If such a situation were to occur, the Big Dipper army would surely be mobilized. In addition, he could also mobilize troops from the other borders. Since the founding of the Tang dynasty, there has never been a situation like what you described. War was not a child's play. No matter how ambitious Jelifeng was, no matter how young he was, he still had to think things through. Once you offend the Tang dynasty, you have to consider the consequences of the Tang dynasty's wrath. That's not something that Irai Meng Shizhao can bear. At the end of his words, Zhangqiu Jianqiong harumphed coldly. Meng Shizhao was different from Uzun. Meng Shizhao was a vassal state of the Tang dynasty. Vassal states were those that were influenced by Confucianism and could be occupied, but were not. If Meng Shizhao dared to go against him, he would have to consider the consequences. Lord, Wang Chong doesn't know whether Meng Shizhao will be able to form an alliance with Uzun, but it is a fact that Meng Shizhao has sent an envoy to contact the 7th Uzun. Wang Chong sat upright, and his words shocked everyone present. Zhangqiu Jianqiong, Xianyu Zhongtong, and the other generals of Jiannan were shocked. Chong Gongzi, what do you mean by that? You said that Meng Shizhao contacted Uzun to form an alliance, is that true? Zhangqiu Jianqiong asked grimly. Initially, he thought that Wang Chong was just seeking advice from him. After all, as the scion of a general, it was normal for him to do so. However, Wang Chong's words had already exceeded the scope of seeking advice. It was already within the scope of military affairs. If Meng Shizhao were to ask Uzun for an alliance, it would not be a small matter. The southwest was under his jurisdiction, at least until he entered the Ministry of War. If something went wrong, everyone present would be implicated. Not long ago, I got to know a noble young master from Irai. His father was a high-ranking official in Meng Shizhao. According to him, Jelifeng had already sent a trusted minister as an envoy to Uzun to express his intention of forming an alliance. That young master has a good impression of our Tang dynasty and doesn't want to start a war with our Tang dynasty. Plus, I treated him with great hospitality. That's why he said this unintentionally when he was drunk. However, he sobered up after getting drunk. Realizing that he had made a slip of the tongue, he hurriedly returned to Irai the next day. He didn't even bid farewell. The general was the Annan Protector General, which was why Wang Chong had said such a thing. "I don't mean to offend you," Wang Chong said. Those words abruptly caused the atmosphere in the banquet to turn heavy. The generals in the pavilion glanced at one another with grim expressions on their faces. Even Yang Zhao's expression froze as he realized the severity of the situation. "Chong Gongzi, pardon me for asking too much, but what is the surname of that noble from Irai?" Zhangqiu Jianqiong asked gravely. "Chen," Wang Chong said. Seeing that he had attracted the attention of all the generals of the southwest, Wang Chong inwardly said, "I apologize." The matter at Nanzhao was no small matter. It concerned the lives of 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty and dozens of cities in the southwest, as well as the lives of nearly 1 million civilians. In order to be wary of the generals from Jiannan and make preparations for the future, he could only resort to such underhanded means. "Chen." Zhangqiu Jianqiong lowered his head in contemplation. He couldn't be any more familiar with the upper echelons of Mengshi Zhao. Thinking back, there was indeed an official surnamed Chen by Jelifeng's side. Furthermore, this person had accompanied Jelifeng on a diplomatic mission to the Tang dynasty in the past. Could the words of Duke Zhou's grandson be true? Was Jelifeng plotting a rebellion, intending to ally with Uzun to deal with the Tang dynasty? Jelifeng is an ambitious person who doesn't care about the consequences. What he wants is only his own ambition. Also, Lord Protector General has also said that in a one-on-one fight, Mengshi Zhao is definitely no match for the Tang dynasty. Thus, if he wishes to succeed, he has to contact Uzun. Irai and Mengshi Zhao are far apart, separated by the Tang dynasty. Regardless of what request Uzun has for Mengshi Zhao, even if it means bowing down to him, Jelifeng will surely agree to it. After all, this is all in name only. Even if Uzun wants to do something, he can't bypass the Tang dynasty and ask for Mengshi Zhao's help. This plan of driving the tiger to swallow the wolf was definitely in line with Mengshi Zhao's interests. At the very least, Jelifeng can completely break free from the Tang dynasty's control. Seeing that his words were effective, Wang Chong immediately struck while the iron was hot and inculcated his words. As for Uzun, the conflicts between him and the Tang dynasty are increasing day by day, and he has also fought against the Tang dynasty several times against the Tang dynasty. Even if he can't get anything out of the alliance with Mengshi Zhao, as long as he can suppress the Tang dynasty, it will be beneficial to him. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. If Mengshi Zhao requests an alliance, as long as he can confirm the sincerity and authenticity of Mengshi Zhao's alliance, there's an extremely high chance that Uzun will agree to Mengshi Zhao's request. Zhangqiu Jianqiong stared at the youthful face of this youth, a look of shock in his eyes. Even Xian Yuzhongtong could sense that there was something unusual about this earnest youth, and a solemn look appeared in his eyes. At the very least, none of the surrounding generals of the southwest dared to think that he was spouting nonsense. For the first time, everyone sensed the extraordinary weight of this youth. Although this youth from the Wang clan was young, he was able to hit the nail on the head with regards to the relationship between Uzun and Mengshi Zhao. Before this, they had all believed that this youth was spouting nonsense, a curse, a deliberate insult to the Protector General. But at this very moment, they couldn't help but think that Wang Chang's words made sense. Even though Mengshi Zhao and Uzun had never worked together before, it wasn't impossible for them to work together. Just as Wang Chong said, Mengshi Zhao could make use of Uzun to break free from the control of the Tang dynasty and become an independent kingdom. On the other hand, Uzun could make use of Mengshi Zhao to deal a blow to the Tang dynasty and wash away the humiliation of being defeated in the hands of the Tang dynasty. Putting aside anything else, just to deal a blow to the Tang dynasty, Uzun would be willing to form an alliance with Wang Chong. More importantly, everyone thought that the Uzun Empire wouldn't descend into the east easily. After all, the Uzun Empire had never touched Jiannan, let alone ventured deep into the mainland. As such, they knew nothing about Jiannan. If they were to wage war on a land that they knew nothing about, the strength of the Uzun Empire would surely be greatly reduced. While Uzun Empire wasn't familiar with the mainland, Mengshizhao was. Every year, countless merchants would enter Jiannan from Irai. Even the civil and military officials would frequent Jiannan. With Mengshizhao leading the way and acting as an insider, the final weakness of Uzun Empire disappeared. Even Zhangqiu Jianqiong had to admit that the words of the Wang clan's Qilin's son weren't impossible, but highly probable. For a moment, his heart couldn't help but sink. Slowly raising his head, he glanced at the young man before him, and the feeling in his heart suddenly changed. Before coming to the capital, Zhangqiu Jianqiong had heard of this young man's reputation. In the regional commander's incident, this young man was undoubtedly the center of attention, and he had stirred up the hearts of many generals in the military. However, hearing about it was one thing, and experiencing it for himself was another. Even though he had helped Wang Chong in the regional commander's incident, his impression back then was that the young man was fearless, and the conflict between the Hu and Han was indeed in line with his interests. However, the current situation was completely different. The southwest was his territory, and regardless of whether it was Mengshizhao of Irai or Uzun of the west, Zhangqiu Jianqiong knew them like the back of his hand. Yet, this young man was able to dominate his territory, and yet, he was still able to hit the nail on the head. For the first time, Zhangqiu Jianqiong felt that he had underestimated the young man. The reason why he was able to host this banquet at the Ten Sun Tavern was due to Wang Chong's help. But more than that, it was because Wang Chong was Duke Zhou's grandson and nephew. It was because of the prestigious identity behind him. But all of a sudden, Zhangqiu Jianqiong realized that he was wrong. Even if the young man before him was stripped of his prestigious background and his identity as Wang Zhen's nephew, his talent was still dazzling. It can't be a coincidence that this young man is able to attract the attention of so many people. Unknowingly, everyone in the Annan West Protector General's attitude toward Wang Chong had undergone a subtle change, becoming one that was filled with respect. Chapter 275. Zhongtong, did you hear Wang Gongzi's words? Reining in his thoughts, Zhangqiu Jianqiong turned to look at Xianyu Zhongtong by the side. Zhangqiu Jianqiong didn't dare to underestimate the young man before him. Yes, Lord Protector General. Xianyu Zhongtong stood up and replied respectfully. After we return, conduct a strict check on the borders of Irai. All of the merchants traveling between Mengshizhao and Uzun are to be monitored, especially those traveling along the Tea-Horse Road. All official documents are to be checked, and those without official documents are strictly prohibited from entering or leaving. After I enter the Bureau of Military Personnel, you will be the Southern Protector General. You must heed Wang Gongzi's words. You mustn't allow any chance of an alliance between Mengshizhao and Uzun. Zhangqiu Jianqiong said. I understand. I'll use a flying kite to contact the generals in Jiannan and have them keep a tight watch on the borders. Xianyu Zhongtong said. We can't afford to lose anything in Annan. Once the matter here is settled, you should return to Jiannan. Zhangqiu Jianqiong said. Reaching this step was already his limit. It was impossible for him to guard the entire area to the south of the Jianghu Pavilion. If Jelifeng really wanted to form an alliance with Uzun, there was nothing he could do about it. But deep in his heart, Zhangqiu Jianqiong still believed that even if Mengshizhao wanted to form an alliance with Uzun, the matter wouldn't be as simple as it seemed. What Wang Chong said wasn't impossible, but it wasn't guaranteed to happen. Besides, the Tang dynasty wasn't one to be trifled with. With the advantage of geographical advantage, the Tang dynasty wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Looking at Zhangqiu Jianqiong and Xianyu Zhongtong speaking, Wang Chong wanted to say something, but he hesitated. Until now, Zhangqiu Jianqiong still thought that the 180,000 elites of the Annan Protectorate Manor had a city to rely on. However, Wang Chong could not tell him that the future was not the 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty sitting in the city waiting for Meng Shizhao and Uzun to attack. On the contrary, due to a special reason, the 180,000 elites of the Annan Protectorate left the territory they were familiar with and were completely wiped out. Wang Chong couldn't say any of this out loud. It wasn't just because of the Fate Stone's restrictions. Wang Chong couldn't possibly reveal this information in advance, and even if Wang Chong did say it, no one would believe him. Wang Chong couldn't be complacent. He couldn't possibly say that he had been reborn, so he knew what would happen in the future. Putting aside Zhangqiu Jianqiong and the others, even big uncle Wang Zhen would take him for a lunatic. No one would believe such a shocking statement. At that time, he could only adapt to the situation. Looks like this is the only way. Wang Chong sighed deeply. He knew that this was the limit of what he could do. At the very least, he could use this banquet to give these generals of the Southwest some hope. At the very least, they wouldn't be defenseless in the future. As for the rest, he could only think of another way. Chong Gongzi is a young hero. Your insight and courage are few among your peers. Your future is bound to be limitless. After appraising Xianyu Zhongtong, Zhangqiu Jianqiong turned to look at Wang Chong said with a smile. Lord, you are flattering me. I'm just making a casual remark. I hope that Lord won't take offense. Wang Chong hurriedly said. Ha ha ha, to be able to gain such insight from a casual remark, that's even more incredible. There's no need for Chong Gongzi to be humble. Come, let's drink. Let's toast to Chong Gongzi. Zhangqiu Jianqiong raised his wine cup. Zhu Gongzi. Zhu Gongzi, that the crowd echoed in agreement. Draining the wine cup in a single gulp, Zhangqiu Jianqiong shot a glance at Wang Chong, deep in thought. Wang Yan of the Wang clan has limited aptitude, and he can only be considered to be above average in the military. He's overly upright and lacks flexibility. However, the children he gave birth to are each more formidable than the last. It's one thing for the eldest son, Wang Fu, to have such insight at such a young age is truly astonishing. With just these children, the Wang clan will probably be filled with talents in the future. I advised Zhong Tong to get closer to this child in the future, but even I have to get closer to this child. Zhangqiu Jianqiong's heart was in turmoil. This gathering had only lasted for a short period of time, but it had completely changed Zhangqiu Jianqiong's opinion of Wang Chong. Extraordinary insight, sharp eyes, and sharp talent in military affairs, as well as his background, this youth's future was bound to be limitless. In Zhangqiu Jianqiong's heart, he no longer viewed Wang Chong as a child, but an existence who could stand on equal footing with him. Even though Wang Chong's standing was far beneath him, he was already worthy of his investment. Amidst their conversation, the dishes were served. A tall and beautiful Goguryeo lady brought a plate of phoenix-tailed shark fins over with a few other ladies. The phoenix-tailed shark fins were stewed to a crisp, and a thick layer of sauce was poured over it. This sauce was made from more than a dozen ingredients, and the aroma of the phoenix-tailed shark fins whetted one's appetite. Humph! All of a sudden, a cold harumph echoed in the air. Just as the tall and beautiful Goguryeo lady was about to put down her plate and retract her plate, a hand as sharp as a steel clamp suddenly gripped her wrist tightly. "Gu guest, what are you doing?" This sudden sight caused the lady to exclaim in shock. She stammered in the language of the Central Plains, and her face paled in fright. At the same time, the other ladies were also stunned. There was a sudden silence in the pavilion. Countless gazes from all directions turned to look at the hand that was holding the woman's wrist. Everyone around the table stopped drinking and turned their gazes over. In an instant, the atmosphere became extremely bizarre. "Gu guest, we don't provide such services here. Please let go of me." Behind the tall and beautiful lady, another lady who was delivering food stammered nervously. Hearing those words, Wang Chong chuckled inside. He picked up the wine cup on the table and took a sip. For the great Southern Protector General to be called a lustful person, he would surely become a laughing stock if word got out. Even though he didn't know why Zhangqiu Jianqiong was grabbing the lady's wrist, Wang Chong could guess that something must have gone wrong. Since Zhangqiu Jianqiong had specially chosen the Ten Sun Tavern as his host, Wang Chong was more than happy to watch the show from the side. What is this? Zhangqiu Jianqiong stared at the lady with a frosty expression. The atmosphere in the tavern also plummeted, as though an ice cavern. Phoenix-tailed shark fins. The lady asked doubtfully. Why don't you take a bite then? Zhangqiu Jianqiong picked up the chopsticks on his plate, picked up a mouthful of shark fins, and sent it over to the beautiful lady. Hua! Upon seeing that mouthful of shark fins, the stammering lady suddenly panicked, as though she had been violated. It was as though the shark fins that were being passed over were some sort of savage beast. Do it! Behind the beautiful lady, a maid whose face was pale from fright a moment ago suddenly bellowed in Goguryeo. Tossing aside the tray in her hand, she whipped out a dagger from her waist and stabbed it toward Zhangqiu Jianqiong with lightning speed. Hua hua hua! Plates of food and water were splashed toward the crowd. In an instant, the feeble ladies suddenly turned into Asuras from hell, charging toward the crowd with their swords. Do it! Kill them! Avenge King Sojurim! Kill all of these Tang people! Leave none alive! For the glory of the empire! A series of short and intense shouts in Goguryeo, carrying a bone-chilling killing intent, sounded from the surroundings. Peng peng peng, the doors of the booths around the hall were jolted open, and the assassins tore off their disguises and charged at the group with lightning speed. Dense killing chi surged in the air. Clumps of stellar energy flickered with halos, covering the sky and earth, filling the entire pavilion. And a significant portion of them were actually targeting Wang Chong. As I expected. Wang Chong held the wine cup in his hand as he sensed the frenzied attacks coming from all directions, but he wasn't surprised at all. This was the Ten Sun Tavern, the center of the Goguryons, as well as the place of the highest standing. After the previous operation, there was probably no Goguryeon in the capital who didn't recognize him. It would be a wonder if they could hold themselves back after seeing him, the culprit, appear. It was already impressive that they could hold themselves back until now. It's a pity that you chose the wrong place and the wrong opponent. Wang Chong sneered coldly as he raised the wine cup in his hand and gulped it down in a single gulp. Boom! Almost at the same moment that Wang Chong raised his wine cup and gulped it down, boom! There was a flash of light, and a surge of golden stellar energy, pure and majestic, gushed forth. In that instant, the halo dissipated, and time seemed to have frozen. Other than Wang Chong and the others, everyone else froze in midair, maintaining the posture they were in before the attack. You overestimate yourself. An indiscernible cold harumph sounded in their ears, and in the next instant, with a loud explosion, the waitress, the assassins, and everyone else was blasted into smithereens. A rain of blood and bones rained down from the sky, but not a single one of them came close to the group. Who? The wind was vast and mighty, and sand and stones flew everywhere. In an instant, all of the blood rain, along with the skeletal remains, was pushed out, breaking through the pavilion and scattering onto the street. On the other hand, other than some blood stains on the floor, the tavern was completely clean. The 40 top-notch Goguryeon assassins had already vanished from the face of the earth. In an instant, the Ten Sun Tavern fell deathly silent. All of the hubbub and silence vanished, leaving only silence in its wake. The sounds of intense battle on the second floor beneath Wang Chong's feet also vanished in an instant. Opposite Wang Chong, Zhangqiu Jianqiong was still seated on the chair, not moving his palm in the slightest. If not for Wang Chong, no one would have known that Zhangqiu Jianqiong was the culprit behind that massacre. A Saint Martial realm expert was simply too powerful. Wang Chong had once reached that realm, so Wang Chong didn't panic in the slightest. In fact, he even drank a cup of wine calmly. These Gogurians would never know what kind of expert they were facing. This wasn't an ordinary expert, but a protector general of the empire. Sitting before him, Wang Chong felt even safer than hiding in the midst of an army. These Gogurians have made a mistake in their calculations and underestimated the wrong person. Do you know why I chose to hold this banquet in the Ten Sun Tavern? Zhangqiu Jianxiong poured himself a cup of wine before slowly lifting his head. On his face was an extremely cold and callous expression. It was only at this moment that Zhangqiu Jianxiong showed everyone the cold and cruel side of him that ruled over the southwest and slaughtered countless enemies. As the marshal of the empire, it was impossible for him to rise to his current position if he didn't have some sort of iron-blooded means. However, Wang Chong knew that Zhangqiu Jianxiong's words weren't meant for him but for the survivors in the Ten Sun Tavern. I've heard that there has never been a protector general of the empire who became the minister of war. If there is, he will have to step on fresh blood. Today's banquet is to welcome me back from my long journey. There's no one in the army who doesn't drink blood. Chapter 276. Zhangqiu Jianxiong's eyes were brimming with killing intent. At this moment, even Wang Chong and Wang Zhen had grim expressions on their faces. The moment Zhangqiu Jianxiong revealed his identity, he was no longer the person who was chatting casually at the banquet. Instead, he was the protector general of the empire, one of the few commanders of the empire. Smelling the thick stench of blood in the air and listening to Zhangqiu Jianxiong's words, Wang Chong finally understood why this protector general would choose to host a banquet here on his first day in the capital. The assassination and encirclement in the capital, as well as King Sozhirim's death, couldn't have escaped Zhangqiu Jianxiong's eyes and ears. He must have known that his appearance would invite the Gogurians to assassinate him. He was doing this intentionally. Hosting a banquet at the Ten Sun Tavern wasn't just to borrow the yang energy of the 10 Golden Crows. The Southern Protector General's actions were far more violent and domineering than he seemed on the surface. He was using his blood as a sacrifice to pave a path to the central courtyard. And the Gogurians were the perfect target. However, Wang Chong had no objections to it. How could a commander who had bathed in blood on the battlefield not have a thirst for blood? Which commander didn't have their hands dyed red with blood? Wang Chong offers a toast to Protector General. With such thoughts in mind, Wang Chong suddenly filled his cup and raised it. Ha ha ha, good. Zhangqiu Jianxiong was taken aback for a moment before he burst into laughter. A hint of admiration flashed in his eyes. How could a descendant of a clan of generals not have any guts? He thought that this lad would be frightened by the previous scene and lose his appetite. Yet, to think that the other party would remain calm, not showing the slightest hint of panic. His composure didn't seem befitting of someone of his age at all. Chong Gongzi is indeed a tiger of our clan of generals. I'll drink this cup of wine. On the other hand, Zhangqiu Jianxiong raised his cup and drained it in a single gulp. Brother Jiexin, this nephew of yours is truly a dragon among men. He has guts, insight, and charisma. Given time, he will surely have a bright future ahead of him. Zhangqiu Jianxiong looked at Wang Zhen and said. Wang Zhen's expression changed slightly. The Wang clan was not a purely scholarly family. When the old master was young, he had led troops into battle, and his hands had seen plenty of blood. Wang Zhen didn't even bat an eyelid at an assassination attempt in a tavern. What truly moved him was Zhangqiu Jianxiong's words. To be able to obtain the praise of the Tang dynasty's great crocodile Zhangqiu Jianxiong at the age of 15, it would definitely be of great benefit to Wang Chang's future development. This was different from the regional commander's incident. This kind of praise from the upper echelons of the imperial military was extremely difficult to obtain. Whether it was Zhangqiu Jianxiong, Fomen Linta, Gao Xianji, or Zhang Shougue, at their level of strength and status, they treated their words like gold. It wasn't that they were stingy with their praise, but at their level of strength and status, every word they uttered would have a unique impact, especially in the military. As the saying went, spilled water could not be retrieved. If a person they had taken a liking to or praised ended up achieving nothing, or if they had great ambitions but little talent, their accomplishments would be limited. This would have a massive impact on the other protector generals and commanders. Thus, in the Tang dynasty of the Central Plains, it was very rare to hear a protector general or commander of an empire praise someone publicly. Even if he was displeased, he would never say it out loud or in public. As the saying went, words of gold and jade. The higher one's status, the more this was true. If Wang Chong were to enter the military in the future, Zhangqiu Jianqiong's praise would be extremely beneficial to him. Just this praise from Zhangqiu Jianqiong would be able to reduce the difficulties Wang Chong would face in the future. To be able to receive such praise before even officially entering the military, Wang Chong was probably the only one in the capital who could do so. Thank you, Lord Protector General. Wang Chong reacted quickly and respectfully expressed his gratitude. Wang Chong had never imagined that a cup of wine could be exchanged for Zhangqiu Jianqiong's praise. Ha, I'm not praising you. Work hard. Zhangqiu Jianqiong gestured with his eyes, and a general of the southwest immediately walked over, took out a special silver chopstick, and plunged it into the bowl of shark fins. Swish! In the blink of an eye, the silver chopstick turned black, and the tip of the chopstick was even tinged with a bluish-violet color. At the sight of this, the faces of everyone in the pavilion turned extremely ugly. This thing is very poisonous. Wang Chong was inwardly alarmed. Silver chopsticks would at most turn black upon contact with poison, but this chopstick was tinged with bluish-violet. It was clear that the poison had reached a pinnacle, far surpassing that of ordinary poisons. These people had first delivered 4 non-poisonous appetizers to numb the crowd before delivering the true feast. They had truly put in a lot of effort. Even if they failed, they still had other means of assassination. This was the territory of the Gogurians, and it was far too easy for them to gather the Gogurians for an assassination. Even if they were to walk past the crowd, they would only think that they were from the 10 Sun Tavern. However, they had only miscalculated the identity of the people around them and Zhangqiu Jianqiong's capability. Poisoning in front of a Saint Martial realm expert, you're really trying to show off in front of an expert, you're seeking death. Glancing at the bloodstains on the floor, Wang Chong didn't feel the slightest pity for the culprit. Those who aren't of our tribe should be spared. There was no need for us to show mercy to those who aren't of our tribe. Bring the dishes up. If you don't wish to die, prepare this banquet properly. Otherwise, everyone in this tavern will die. Since it's a traitor, you must have accomplices. Kill everyone in the surrounding streets as well. Zhangqiu Jianqiong said coldly. His voice reverberated throughout the entire tavern. In the booths, the kitchen, the first floor, the second floor, the third floor. There were still many assassins who hadn't been dealt with yet, but they were all intimidated by Zhangqiu Jianqiong's means. Zhangqiu Jianqiong couldn't be bothered with them. Regardless of whether they were assassins, chefs, or maids, regardless of their identities, this feast had to be prepared for him. Even if he was a burly assassin, he would have to obediently serve as a cook for him today, cooking up a feast that was both beautiful and fragrant. Cold sweat trickled down the foreheads of the assassins in the 10 Sun Tavern. The strength of these people had far exceeded their expectations. Moreover, he had never seen such a domineering person. The Golden and Red Tavern on the 3rd floor was deathly silent, and the air was suffused with an intense aura of death. A cold voice sounded from the 3rd floor. Even though they couldn't see anything, the aura of death in the air was more than 100-fold stronger. That fearsome threat of death left everyone's hair standing on end. But what left the Gogurian assassins the most fearful was Zhangqiu Jianqiong's final threat. Why? We are the only ones who are here to kill you, why must you implicate the innocent? Countless pairs of eyes stared at the wooden floor of the 3rd floor where Zhangqiu Jianqiong and the others were seated. Deep indignation, rage, fear, and helplessness could be seen in their eyes. Only a small portion of the Gogurians in the shops around the Ten Sun Tavern had participated in this operation, and most of them were innocent. Most of the assassins were already prepared to be killed in the event of failure. But now, the nature of the situation was completely different. There was no doubt that the expert of the Tang dynasty on the third floor would do as he said and kill everyone on the street. Death wasn't scary. However, a meaningless death that would implicate the innocent and ordinary people was unacceptable to them. In just a short moment, under the urging of some invisible force, the group of assassins in the Ten Sun Tavern began to move. Some chopped the vegetables, some cooked the vegetables, some washed the dishes. The entire Ten Sun Tavern seemed to have become an intricate gear. After a momentary pause, it began to move once more, as if nothing had happened at all. All right, I can continue with the banquet now. Sensing the commotion in the tavern, Zhangqiu Jianqiong sneered coldly before turning his attention back to the banquet on the third floor. Pa! With a light flick of his finger, the venomous phoenix-winged fish tail flew out of the tavern and onto the street. Wang Chong watched on coldly from the side. He couldn't be any clearer about the changes in the atmosphere in the tavern. After killing the assassins, he actually managed to convince the Gogurians in the Ten Sun Tavern to swallow their anger and continue cooking, as if nothing had happened. Even Wang Chong was impressed by Zhangqiu Jianqiong's means. There isn't a single protector general of the Tang dynasty who is weak. In my previous life, the Southwest has been peaceful for far too long, so I didn't hear much about this protector general. Now that I think about it, I've probably underestimated him. Wang Chong thought. Those who are good at fighting don't rise to fame, this was the impression Zhangqiu Jianqiong gave off. As Wang Chong thought, he soon recalled the other purpose of his trip. Right, Protector General, may I know if you can give me a token? Wang Chong suddenly asked with a smile. Oh. What do you want my token for? Zhangqiu Jianqiong asked curiously. If it were anyone else who had made such a request, it would have seemed rude and offensive. However, Wang Chong's request as a junior felt that it was reasonable and natural. Thus, Zhangqiu Jianqiong was only a little curious. Hee, I have never left the capital before. If there's a chance in the future, I would like to pay a visit to the Southwest Jianghu Pavilion to do some business. If I have Lord Chang's token, it will be much more convenient. Wang Chong said half-jokingly. Oh. Zhangqiu Jianqiong's shoulders twitched as he leaned forward with an interested look on his face. He hadn't forgotten that the person before him was an expert at doing business. May I know what kind of business Gongzi Chong wishes to do? If that was all, there would be no need to go through so much trouble. Zhong Tong is here now, and the affairs of the Southwest will be managed by him. If Gongzi Chong wishes to do business, we can grant you any convenience you require right now. Zhangqiu Jianqiong said. This could also be considered a show of goodwill. He had come to the capital alone, and even if he could become the Minister of War in the future, he would still need the help of the other great clans. In this aspect, Consort Tai Jin was of no help at all. The imperial harem was not allowed to interfere in politics, and this was an ironclad law in every dynasty. Zhangqiu Jianqiong needed allies, and a very powerful one at that. Zhangqiu Jianqiong didn't just intend to treat Wang Zhen and his nephew to a meal. Wang Zhen didn't say anything, but his brow furrowed imperceptibly as he shot a glance at Wang Chong. How could Zhangqiu Jianqiong's thoughts be hidden from him? But what surprised Wang Zhen the most was still Wang Chong. What is this child up to? I clearly told him earlier that Zhangqiu Jianqiong was in too muddy of a situation, and while it wasn't good to offend him, it wasn't good to get too close to him either. What is this child up to? Wang Zhen's brow furrowed, his mind in turmoil. Zhangqiu Jianqiong wanted nothing more than to get close to the Wang clan, and Wang Chong was the one who was giving him this opportunity. Wang Zhen wanted to stop him, but in the end, he chose to remain silent. Chapter 277. Hee, it's not much of a business deal. I want to buy a plot of land in Jiannan. Wang Chong chuckled. Where? Zhangqiu Jianqiong asked curiously. Lion Rock Hill. Wang Chong said. Hearing Wang Chong's words, Zhangqiu Jianqiong, Xianyu Zhongtong, and the other generals stared at one another in bewilderment. They thought that Wang Chong wanted to buy a plot of land in the flourishing area of Annan. But to think that it would actually be there. Wang Gongzi, are you certain? Lion Rock Hill is a barren land. Only those who are on their way to Irai would pass through the area. On normal days, not a single person can be found in a radius of several dozen li. Xianyu Zhongtong said. They were from the Annan Protectorate Manor, so they couldn't be any more familiar with the situation south of Jiannan. The so-called Lion Rock Mountain sounded grand, but in fact, it was just a small, obscure mountain. Given that it was so close to the borders of the Annan Protectorate Manor's territory, it could be said to be completely worthless. Xianyu Zhongtong couldn't understand why a scion of a general clan would want to buy such a small hill. Hee, I heard from a friend that the Tea-Horse Road's business is quite good, and he intends to build a base there to rest and stock up his goods. This way, it would be more convenient for him to interfere in the business of the Tea-Horse Road. Wang Chong said. I see, so that's the case. The Tea-Horse Road is indeed a profitable business. It's no wonder that Gongzi would want to interfere. Zhangqiu Jianqiong nodded in understanding. In truth, the Tea-Horse Road was a trade in Irai tea and Yusang horses, and there was a huge profit to be made from this trade. Of the 10 major clans in Jiannan, at least 7 or 8 of them had such businesses. It wasn't surprising that the Wang clan would want to interfere in this matter. Zhongtong, I need you to help Wang Gongzi settle this matter after we return. Zhangqiu Jianqiong turned to Xianyu Zhongtong and instructed. Yes, I'll get it done after we return. Xianyu Zhongtong said respectfully. A Lion Rock Mountain was not worth much money. Xianyu Zhongtong also understood that the Protector General had taken the initiative to pull strings with the Wang clan. In order to succeed the Southern Protector General position, he needed the help of the Wang clan. Hee, Chong Gongzi, this token is for you. If you want to go to Annan in the future, this token may be of great convenience to you. After instructing Xianyu Zhongtong, Zhangqiu Jianqiong flicked a golden token toward Wang Chong. Thank you, my lord. Wang Chong was overjoyed. This was an unexpected harvest. Not only did he subdue the Lion Rock Massif, he also obtained a personal token from Zhangqiu Jianqiong. During this trip to the 10-Sun restaurant, Wang Chong had obtained the 2 things he wanted the most. It could be said to be perfect. Whoosh! I've done all I can. I'll do my best. The rest is up to luck. Wang Chong heaved a long sigh of relief, and he felt much more at ease. Lion Rock Massif was a small mountain located at the southern border of the Tang dynasty. Naturally, Wang Chong didn't intend to purchase the mountain for business. Even though the profits from the Tea-Horse Road were decent, it wasn't attractive to Wang Chong. No matter how great the profits from the tea leaves were, it couldn't compare to the profits from the Hyderabad ores, not to mention, there were so many people who wanted a share of the profits. The reason why Wang Chong wanted the Lion Rock Massif was due to its geographical location. To the west of the Lion Rock Massif was a vast expanse of flat land. That was where the southwest battlefield of the empire would be located. Wang Chong had checked the map of the Bureau of Military Personnel, and the entire region spanning several hundred li was devoid of any natural defenses. And the Lion Rock Massif was the only obstacle in that region. The reason why Wang Chong bought the Lion Rock Massif wasn't to build a base. Instead, he wanted to build a city, an unprecedentedly huge city. A barrier that could protect the 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty at the most crucial moment when the situation was dire. Such a barrier would surely cost a huge sum of money. It wasn't 10,000, tens of thousands, or even 100,000 gold taels, but millions of gold taels. In fact, it might not even be enough. But regardless of how much it would cost in the future, Wang Chong didn't care at all. Wang Chong didn't accumulate gold for no reason. The future Lion Rock Massif was the only thing he could do for the future battlefield. The Gogurians served the dishes swiftly. Perhaps it was because they were holding a knife to their necks, or perhaps they knew that with a single word from Zhangqiu Jianqiong, everyone in the vicinity would be beheaded. In any case, it didn't take long for a table full of appetizing dishes to be served. When the serving maids were served, their heads were lowered, and their shoulders and arms were trembling uncontrollably. However, regardless of whether it was the generals of the southwest or Wang Chong, none of them treated them as ordinary maids. Hehe, I heard that Chong Gongzi is interested in Governor Zhang Wentuo. While they were eating, Zhangqiu Jianqiong suddenly brought up a matter. Yes. Wang Chong didn't deny it. Instead, he shot a glance at Yang Zhao. The latter smiled awkwardly and hurriedly turned his head to the side. Needless to say, Wang Chong knew that it was due to Yang Zhao's capability. He had only mentioned this matter to him before. Hehe, that person over there is Wentuo. Zhangqiu Jianqiong suddenly pointed to a burly man at the end of the long banquet table. His head was lowered, and it was clear that he was out of place. Lord Protector General. That man raised his head and looked at Zhangqiu Jianqiong with a dazed expression. Clearly, he hadn't heard what Zhangqiu Jianqiong had just said. It's him. Wang Chong was astonished. In the Tang dynasty, the military and the government were separated. As the governor, Zhang Wentuo had great independence. Even though he was under the control of the protectorate manor, it wasn't that severe. Wang Chong didn't expect the burly man seated at the end of the banquet table to be Zhang Wentuo. With a smile, Wang Chong quickly retracted his gaze. I'll talk to him another time. Wang Chong thought. Even though Wang Chong wanted to have a chat with him, he knew that this wasn't the right time, place, or occasion for a meeting. After staying in the Ten Sun Tavern for a while longer, Wang Chong and big uncle Wang Zhen left together. Chonger, what are you thinking about? Didn't I tell you? You mustn't get too involved in Zhangqiu Jianqiong's affairs. After leaving the Ten Sun Tavern, a deep frown appeared on Wang Zhen's forehead. With so many people in the tavern, it was hard for him to say anything, but now that he was out of the tavern, he could no longer hold himself back. Zhangqiu Jianqiong was a protector general of the empire. If he were to succeed, the Wang clan wouldn't stand to benefit at all. If he failed, the Wang family would be too deeply involved, and there would only be 100 disadvantages and no advantages. Politics was a dangerous place. Those people wouldn't disregard Wang Chong just because he was a child. To outsiders, Wang Chong represented the entire Wang clan. Big uncle, do you still remember my father? Wang Chong lifted his head. Zhengji? Wang Zhen was taken aback. This matter is related to him. Wang Chong nodded. Big uncle, do you still remember His Highness the King of Song recommending my father for the conferment of a marquis? Wang Zhen nodded. Even though my father has been recommended by the King of Song, his qualifications are still too shallow. On top of that, the Bureau of Military Personnel has moved my father and big brother to the vicinity of Jiannan, which is very close to the Southern Protectorate Manor. If my father wishes to be conferred a marquis in the future, he will need Zhangqiu Jianqiong's help. Wang Chong said. Not too long ago, he received news that his father and big brother had already moved to the vicinity of Jiannan. Even though the process was a little complicated, and it took a little longer. Nevertheless, the King of Song still managed to move his father and big brother over. I see. As expected, upon hearing Wang Chong's words, Wang Zhen nodded thoughtfully. If it was for his third brother's conferment, it was still acceptable. After boarding the carriage, Wang Zhen and Wang Chong left. Meanwhile, in the Ten Sun Tavern, after Wang Zhen and Wang Chong bade farewell to the officials, only the generals of the southwest were left in the room. Xian, what do you think? Since there were no outsiders around, Zhangqiu Jianqiong suddenly turned around and looked at the mustached middle-aged strategist by his elbow with a solemn expression. That lad is lying. The middle-aged strategist known as Jian chuckled as he picked up the wine cup on the table and drained it in a single gulp. Ah! Zhangqiu Jianqiong was taken aback. He was intending to ask about Wang Zhen, but he didn't expect Jian to bring up Wang Chong instead. He, does Lord Zhangqiu still think that the key figure of the Wang clan is Wang Zhen? Jian put down his wine cup and asked with an unfathomable smile. Isn't that the case? Zhangqiu Jianqiong was taken aback. Lord Zhangqiu is confused. Yang Zhao, Lord Yang, let me ask you. You have secretly approached Wang Zhen before, right? Did he agree to stand up for you? Jian turned to look at Yang Zhao. That's not the case. Yang Zhao replied honestly. He had stayed in Jiannan, so he knew the standing of the other party by Zhangqiu Jianqiong's side. Then, when did Wang Zhen step forward? Was it after you approached Chong Gongzi? Jian stroked his beard and asked with a smile. It seems like it. Yang Zhao recalled the matter, but he still couldn't understand why the military advisor would ask such a question. Do you still not understand? The key to this matter isn't Wang Zhen but that 15-year-old child. Jian chuckled. There was an indescribable meaning in his smile. Also, didn't you see the banquet earlier? When Chong Gongzi tried to curry favor with Lord Protector General, Lord Wang Zhen was clearly unwilling to do so. Yet, not only did he not stop him, he didn't even say a word. I've looked into it previously, and Lord Wang is known for his strictness. He clearly sensed that something was amiss, but he didn't stop him at all. Isn't that enough to prove that something is amiss? You mean to say that that child is the core of the Wang clan? Zhangqiu Jianqiong couldn't conceal the shock in his eyes. Even if he isn't, it's not far from it. At the very least, that's what Lord Wang Zhen thinks. If I'm not mistaken, that Chong Gongzi is the future clan head of the Wang clan. If Lord Protector General wishes to stand firmly in the capital, it would be best for you to get closer to Chong Gongzi. Jian said with a smile. Throughout the entire banquet, he didn't speak much. In fact, his presence was even more inconspicuous than those minor officials invited to the banquet. But after Wang Chang's departure, the hierarchy of authority in the room became clear. Other than Zhangqiu Jianqiong, Jian was the true second in command of the Protectorate of the Southwest. In fact, his standing was even higher than that of Xianyu Zhongtong. Didn't that Chonger have a favor to ask of us? Lord, this is a great opportunity. Jian leaned back slightly and said with a lazy smile on his face. I understand what I should do. Chapter 278. Translated by Hypersheep 325. After traversing through numerous alleys, Wang Zhen's carriage abruptly came to a halt around a dozen streets away from the Ten Sun Tavern. Wang Chong leaped out of the carriage and bade farewell to big uncle Wang Zhen before sending the carriage off with his gaze. Gongzi, where are we heading to? Eagle, Solitary Wolf, and Steel Arms followed Wang Chong down from the carriage and asked. We're going to look for someone. Wang Chong smiled. Glancing at the golden token in his palm, he quickly kept Zhangqiu Jianqiong's token into his robe. After meeting Xianyu Zhongtong, obtaining Zhangqiu Jianqiong's token, and learning that Zhang Wentua had come to the capital with him, it was time for him to look for that person. Following a dark and damp alley, they soon left the affluent region of the capital. Before them, a series of short and dilapidated houses gradually appeared. This was the slums. Wherever there was a rich, there would be a poor. The same went for the capital. After turning a few alleys, the houses before them grew more and more dilapidated. What is Gongzi doing here? Eagle, Solitary Wolf, and Steel Arms were getting more and more curious. The three of them could be considered to be familiar with the capital, but they had never been to this place where Wang Chong had come to. As the heir of the 9th Gongzi, a clan of ministers and generals, they couldn't understand why a noble like Wang Chong would come to such a dilapidated place. This should be the place. Wang Chong looked at the residence before him and said. According to the standards of the slums, the mansion in front of him should be quite grand. However, the decaying wooden door, the wet steps covered in moss, and the grass growing at the base of the walls were more than enough to show that this wasn't some grand residence. Peng peng. Wang Chong walked up the steps and knocked on the door knocker. A moment later, the door opened, and a head peeked out. "Who are you looking for?" That person had sleepy eyes, and he seemed to be a servant. "We are looking for Master Zhang." Wang Chong smiled and said politely. The servant immediately came to his senses. He glanced at the luxurious clothes that Wang Chong and the others were wearing and quickly opened the door. The room was very dark, and there was only a simple oil lamp that emitted a dim light. An old man in his 50s with a face full of wrinkles was lying on a bamboo chair, smoking a pipe. Wisps of bluish-purple smoke lingered in the room, and he looked very dispirited. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to find their way here. "Who are you people?" Although he was talking to the four of them, the old man's eyes were out of focus, and he was smoking his pipe nonchalantly. "Ha, old mister, I'm here to ask for your help in building a house," Wang Chong said. "Humph." When he heard Wang Chong's words, the old man was stunned for a moment. He finally showed a slightly serious expression, but he only smiled coldly. He closed the ash in his tobacco pipe and refused without hesitation. "I don't know where you heard the news that I'm here. However, I advise you to give up on that thought. Ever since I left the Ministry of Works, I will never build a house for anyone else." This person was actually from the Ministry of Works. Behind Wang Chong, the eagle, steel arms, and solitary wolf were astonished. Most of the people in the Ministry of Works were highly paid, and even ordinary officials were well off. At the very least, they wouldn't live here. No one could have imagined that someone from the Ministry of Works would live here. It seems like Gongzi is looking for him for that matter. The three of them thought to themselves. When Wang Chong attended Zhangqiu Jianqiong's banquet, they were there as well, just that they weren't seated at the table. The trio was well aware that Wang Chong had bought the Lion Rock Ridge to build a base here. It seems like Gongzi wants him to help build a base. On the other hand, Gongzi, given how well hidden this place is, how did Gongzi know that he is here? The trio was perplexed. "Elder Zhang, it's not just building a house. I want to build a city," Wang Chong said with a smile. His attention was completely focused on the elder before him. The reason why Wang Chong knew that the elder was here was simple, and it had nothing to do with his memories of his previous life. Back when Wang Chong was still a profligate scion, he had once met the elder on the city gate tower. Wang Chong recognized him immediately. As a qualified profligate scion, this was the most basic ability one should possess. A city? Even though the elder wasn't interested in the four of them, he couldn't help but widen his eyes upon hearing Wang Chong's words. However, his face soon darkened, replaced by rage. "Gongzi, are you joking with this old man? I don't care which family you are from, but scram right now." As he spoke, he pointed his tobacco pipe outward. He had seen many things in his life, and he had seen all sorts of people. There were many who had made all sorts of requests. But none of them was this ridiculous. Build a city. Did he think that this was some child's play? Was this something that a single person could build? Did he know how much money it would cost? How much manpower and resources would it take? Even the prestigious clans in the capital wouldn't dare to make such a claim. Was this lad insane? Or did he come here just to tease him? Hee, Elder Zhang, if I say it's true, then it's true. If I wanted to tease you, why would I come all the way here? Wang Chong said seriously. This old man was a little stubborn, and it wouldn't be easy to convince him. However, the base in Jiannan, as well as many of his future plans, would require the capabilities of this craftsman from the Bureau of Works. In Wang Chong's plans, Elder Zhang was an important figure. In fact, he was almost on par with Zhang Munyan. It was just that the timing wasn't suitable. Only now, with Zhangqiu Jianqiong's connection, did Wang Chong find an opportunity to invite him out of his seclusion. "Ha, lad, it's not that I'm looking down on you. Do you know how much money it takes to build a city?" Zhang Shouji said disdainfully. He still couldn't believe that this lad was here to invite him to build a city. 1,000,000 taels. What? Copper coins? Zhang Shouji sneered coldly. Gold. Wang Chong replied seriously. As soon as he finished speaking, the dark, dim room suddenly fell into a deathly silence. Zhang Shouji's pipe hung in midair, and he even forgot to refill it. The eagle, steel arms, and solitary wolf widened their mouths in shock. 1,000,000 taels. Does Gongzi have that much money? And gold? Does building a base require so much money? That the trio was even more shocked than Zhang Shouji. They had been following Wang Chong for quite some time now, and they had vaguely heard of this Gongzi's deeds. They knew that this Gongzi was skilled in business. However, they didn't know that Wang Chong's capability had already reached such a level. This was especially so for Solitary Wolf. He had accepted countless missions in the past. No one understood the significance of 1,000,000 gold taels more than him. Despite working hard for so many years, his earnings didn't even match up to a fraction of what Wang Chong had earned. 1,000,000 gold taels, this was simply unimaginable. This is already comparable to the entire wealth of a prestigious clan. Gongzi's capability in business is truly astonishing. Lone Wolf thought to himself. Lad, are you joking? Zhang Shouji's face froze in disbelief. He wanted to say 100,000 or 200,000, but who could have thought that Wang Chong would directly offer 1,000,000 gold taels? This was far beyond his expectations. Chong! Without saying a word, Wang Chong pulled down 2 tokens from his waist and tossed them over. One was Zhangqiu Jianqiong's personal token, and the other was the Wang clan's token. Zhang Shouji took the 2 tokens in his hand. His eyes, which had been indifferent at first, suddenly trembled when he saw the emblem and symbol on them. Only then did he realize that the background of the young man before him was far beyond his imagination. Old Mister, our Gongzi is a man of his word. His words are worth their weight in gold, and he would never lie. Old Mister, you can trust this. The eagle chimed in. Humph. In just a short moment, Zhang Shouji harumphed. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed Wang Chong's 2 tokens back. Even though I don't know how Gongzi managed to find this place, Gongzi need not waste your efforts. Back then, when I left the Bureau of Works, I said that I would never build anything for anyone ever again. You should just give up on that thought. Zhang Shouji placed his tobacco pipe on the flame, lit it, and began puffing on it once more, as though he was unwilling to talk to Wang Chong anymore. Back then, when he left the Bureau of Works, many prestigious clans came to look for him, and they offered him generous conditions. But in the end, he didn't agree to a single one of them. He was truly disheartened. He had been the supervisor of the Bureau of Works for his entire life, and he had built countless magnificent palaces. But in the end, he was treated like this, and he was even expelled from the Bureau of Works. This humiliation was unbearable. From then on, Zhang Shouji made up his mind to never come into contact with anything related to construction. Old Zhang, why are you in such a hurry to reject me? Wang Chong smiled. He had long heard of Zhang Shouji's temper. All of the outstanding masters in the Bureau of Works had the same temper. However, if he didn't have absolute confidence, he wouldn't have come over. 200,000 gold taels, as long as old Zhang agrees to come out of retirement. I'm willing to provide 200,000 gold taels for old Zhang to continue his research on that secret recipe, and I'll provide even more resources in the future. Wang Chong suddenly extended 2 fingers and smiled mysteriously. Upon hearing the words secret recipe, Zhang Shouji's heart skipped a beat, and he almost swallowed the stem of his tobacco pipe. How old is this lad? How does he know about that matter? Zhang Shouji looked as if he had seen a ghost. Lad, don't speak carelessly. Do you really know about the research? Zhang Shouji was a little tempted. If this lad was really talking about that matter, it would be a great temptation for him. Of course. Wang Chong faintly smiled. Old Zhang, didn't you embezzle money from the palace because of this? You were almost sent to the Ministry of Justice to be beheaded. Zhang Shouji blushed, which was rare for him. Even if he was thick-skinned, he still felt embarrassed when this scandal was exposed in front of him. 200,000 gold taels may not be enough. Young man, you have to think carefully. That is a bottomless pit. I know you come from a prestigious family, but this research is basically a bottomless pit. No matter how much you invest, you may not succeed. If it was that simple, I would have succeeded in the Bureau of Works. How could it be leaked to this extent? Zhang Shouji said seriously, which was rare for him. In more than a decade, this was the first person who expressed his support for him to continue his research. This made Zhang Shouji have a good impression of Wang Chong. Although he might not agree to it. Of course. Not only can I support you with 200,000 gold taels, 300,000 gold taels. I can even provide you with a cement formula. Wang Chong said. Cement? Chapter 279. Zhang Shouji had spent half his life in the field of civil engineering, and he was the most senior official in the Bureau of Works. He knew everything related to civil engineering like the back of his hand. However, Zhang Shouji had never heard of such a thing before. Isn't the strongest brick wall adhesive what you've always wanted to research? This is the formula for it. Perhaps, it might be of some help to you. As Wang Chong spoke, he passed over a piece of paper that he had prepared beforehand. This was the first cement formula in this world. This wasn't the first time Wang Chong had done something like this. But every single time, there was an indescribable feeling in his heart. In the world of martial arts, everything was fine, but the logistics and transportation were extremely inconvenient. Pigeons could reach the capital in a few days. But if they were to travel by horse carriage, it would take at least a month or even longer. Even someone of Zhangzhou Jianqiong's caliber took more than 20 days to reach the capital from Jianghu. Sometimes, the competition between countries was not only about the military strength of both sides, but also a considerable part of the competition was about the logistics of both sides. Wang Chong had been the Grand Marshal of the Central Plains himself, so he couldn't be any clearer on this point. In a war, the side that could transport troops the fastest and send reinforcements earlier would have a higher chance of achieving victory. In a local war, this only concerned the victory or defeat of a single battle. But in a war between empires, this would determine the rise and fall of a nation, as well as the change in authority. But in this era, other than Wang Chong, no one had paid attention to this aspect. In Wang Chong's plan, cement was an extremely important component. Even though it seemed to have come from another world, just like hybrid rice, it wasn't a particularly profound technique. It was just that no one had been able to reach such a level yet. What Wang Chong had given Zhang Shouji was a basic cement formula. As for how to do it and how to produce it, Zhang Shouji would have to do it himself. The room was quiet. Zhang Shouji was indifferent at first, but under the dim light in the room, Zhang Shouji held up the list in his hand and glanced at it. Zhang Shouji's expression immediately changed. He had spent his entire life studying adhesives for bricks and stones. The thing that Wang Chong had given him was obviously a very powerful thing. This thing was even more powerful than the last thing he had researched. The balance in Zhang Shouji's heart was overturned. Under the dim light, Zhang Shouji looked at the list in his hand for a long time. Wang Chong didn't disturb him and just watched silently from the side. "How is it?" Wang Chong said. Zhang Shouji didn't say anything. He held the prescription in his hand and frowned. He seemed to be hesitating and couldn't make up his mind. Wang Chong was taken aback. Then, he seemed to have thought of something. He slowly walked forward and whispered in Zhang Shouji's ear. If old Zhang agrees to it, I can also agree to help you deal with General Su. This sentence was the straw that broke the camel's back. I agree. As long as you can help me get that bastard Su Shizi down. Zhang Shouji nodded his head fiercely. Deep hatred shot out from his eyes. Back then, if that bastard Su Shizi hadn't framed him and tampered with the adhesive he developed, causing cracks to appear in the palace and the walls to collapse, he wouldn't have been expelled from the Ministry of Works and ended up in such a state. Zhang Shouji didn't want him to die, but he didn't want him to. As long as he left the Ministry of Works, everything would be fine. Gongzi, you aren't lying to me, right? I know that you have a powerful background, but Su Shizi is now a general in the palace. It won't be easy to get him down. Does the Wang clan have the ability to do so? Zhang Shouji suddenly recalled something and asked gravely. Hehe, you don't have to worry about that. It won't be easy, but it's not impossible. You just have to wait for my news. Wang Chong waved his hand, a relaxed expression on his face. It wasn't easy to get rid of a general in the palace, and even the Wang clan didn't have the ability to do so. Even the most powerful of clans couldn't extend their hands into the royal palace. However, there was no need for Wang Chong to go through so much trouble. As long as he spoke to the consort Taizhen of the palace, it would be a walk in the park for him to replace the general in the palace. After successfully convincing Zhang Shouji to help him manage the city base in Jiannan, Wang Chong quickly left the remote and dilapidated residence. The sky outside had already darkened. A light breeze blew past, and Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil. The construction of a city was no small matter, and what Wang Chong wanted was a city that could house 180,000 soldiers, provide them with sufficient rations, and defend against the enemy's attacks in times of crisis. This city had to be huge and sturdy, and it had to be equipped with all kinds of fortifications, water, food, and horse rations. None of these were small matters. Even 1,000,000 gold taels would be far from enough. But even so, Wang Chong didn't mind it at all. Wang Chong felt that the help he could provide was simply too little. The current him was still far from the level where his words carried enormous weight, and he could easily decide the policies of the empire with a few casual words. Given Wang Chong's current capability, the city on the Lion Rock Ridge in the southwest of the empire was already his greatest effort. Once I start building the city, the money I have on me will be far from enough. I have to earn more money first. It seems like I have to think of a way to push that matter forward. Wang Chong slowly raised his head, and his mind was in turmoil. His eyes slowly gazed into the depths of the pitch-black night sky. Flap, flap, flap. A moment later, a pigeon flapped its wings and flew across the void toward the Zhang family's residence in the capital. While the pigeon flew toward the Zhang family, more than 30 ingots of Hyderabad ore were also sent to the Zhang family. With the appearance of the Hyderabad ore, the number of Wuxi steel weapons in the capital increased by more than 30, and all of these weapons were sent to the palace. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Wang Chong wasn't a stickler for formalities. As the morning sun rose, thousands of golden rays fell from the clouds and sprinkled on the majestic palace of the Tang dynasty. The walls of the palace glowed in the morning light, as though it was a holy land on earth. At this moment, a figure dressed in court attire was walking alone through the golden palace walls. His head was lowered, and it seemed as though he was deep in thought. Even though there was no one accompanying him, the person's every movement exuded a powerful aura. Moreover, there was a purple token hanging from his waist that was 2 fingers wide, which further revealed this person's extraordinary identity. Within the palace, anyone who had such a purple token hanging from their waist was someone of extraordinary status and had a special status within the palace. This was because these purple tokens were not issued by the court, but by the current Holy Emperor. It won't be long before the annual Holy Emperor's review begins. I hope that His Majesty will be satisfied this year. Li Qingyu frowned, and his mind was preoccupied. He was a third-rank military official, but unlike the officials in the court, Li Qingyu didn't need to go to work in the morning, and he didn't participate in military affairs. He only needed to be in charge of the imperial army in the palace, and he reported directly to the Holy Emperor. The beautiful and luxurious token hanging from his waist was proof of Li Qingyou's identity. As the military official of the palace, or rather, the military official of His Majesty, Li Qingyou wielded great authority, even greater than some of the officials in the court who were in charge of military supplies. At the very least, the wealth that Li Qingyou could mobilize was far beyond imagination. However, this didn't make Li Qingyou happy at all. Instead, he felt immense pressure. As the military official of the imperial army, Li Qingyou had to satisfy the needs of 100,000 imperial army soldiers at the same time. More importantly, Li Qingyou had to satisfy His Majesty's requirements and satisfy the Holy Emperor. However, the quality of the weapons forged by the weaponry workshop and the swordsmithing clans wasn't satisfactory at all. The weapons forged by the weaponry workshop were of varying quality, and the production rate of the swordsmithing clans was too low. The number of weapons they used every year was almost the same as the number they purchased. With such a performance, it was hard to satisfy His Majesty. As the military official who reported directly to His Majesty, there was nothing remarkable about his performance that could leave a deep impression on His Majesty. Sigh, if this goes on. Even if His Majesty doesn't say anything, it'll be hard for me to continue on as a military official. Li Qingyou thought to himself. Ha ha ha. Just as Zhang Xian was feeling vexed, a burst of laughter suddenly sounded from the wall beside him, accompanied by the sounds of intense fighting. Due to the flourishing of martial arts in the royal palace, it was common for imperial army soldiers to spar with one another. Li Qingyou passed by this area every day, so he couldn't be any more familiar with such sounds. However, there was something different about today. Usually, the intense fighting would last for a long time, but today, it ended very quickly. Not only so, the sounds of the battle seemed to be different as well. It didn't seem to be the sound of ordinary weapons. Almost subconsciously, Li Qingyou stopped in his tracks. Again. Just as Zhang Xian was perplexed, the voice from the other side of the palace suddenly sounded indignant. Ha ha ha, bring it on. Even if you go at it 100 more times, you'll still lose. Another hearty voice sounded. Following which, the sound of weapons clashing sounded. Surprisingly, Li Qingyou didn't leave the palace. Instead, he remained outside the palace walls, listening to the Harken. In the royal palace, there were rules. Something like this was too unusual. It was very rare to encounter something like this. Li Qingyou's interest was piqued. Clang! This time around, the battle ended even faster than the previous one. Clang! The sound of a weapon snapping echoed. Due to the excessive force exerted, the tip of a sword flew high into the air, flew past the walls, and landed not too far away from Li Qingyou, stabbing into the sturdy red tiles of the royal palace. This is... In the instant that the tip of the sword landed, Li Qingyou's sharp eyes immediately recognized it, and his heart skipped a beat. Isn't this the famous saber forged by the Lu clan? Li Qingyou rolled up his sleeves and squatted down. He stretched out two fingers that were like iron pincers and carefully picked up the sword tip from the ground. That's right, it was the famous saber of the Lu clan. There was the insignia of the Lu clan on it, so there was no mistaking it. As a military official in the royal palace, he had to deal with such things on a daily basis, so he couldn't be any more familiar with them. The Lu clan was a rising clan in the capital, and they were the youngest among the renowned swordsmithing clans. But perhaps it was precisely for this reason that their swordsmithing clans were the best in terms of appearance, size, and quality. On top of that, as the Lu clan's swordsmithing output was higher, there were many of them in the imperial army. It was truly surprising that the Lu clan's famed sword was broken. But what left Li Qingyou even more astonished was that the cut was as smooth as a mirror. What kind of weapon is that? How could it be so sharp? Li Qingyou couldn't conceal the shock in his eyes. Even though the Lu clan's famed sword wasn't the most formidable, it was definitely top-notch. It wasn't an easy feat to break it. In order to make such a cut, the sword had to be extremely sharp. But despite being in charge of the Imperial Army's armaments for so long, Li Qingyu had never seen any weapon that could be so sharp. So, the battle ended because their sword was broken. A thought flashed across Li Qingyu's mind, and he suddenly understood something. However, Li Qingyu was even more curious about the weapon that broke the Lu clan's famed sword. Ha ha ha, good sword. It's indeed a good sword. Zhou Lai, do you want to do it again? A hearty voice could be heard from within the palace walls, unwilling to let go. Not again, not again. Huang Cheng, aren't you just relying on the Wuzi steel sword you bought? What's there to be proud of? If you are capable, don't use the Wuzi steel sword and fight me one-on-one. The Imperial Guard who lost said. His last sentence caused Li Qingyu, who was standing outside the palace walls, to tremble. Chapter 280. One-on-one. You must be joking. When have you ever seen a tiger cutting off its claws to duel with another? From within the palace walls, the voice of the victor sounded. Huang Cheng, sell it to me for 70,000 gold taels. Humph, don't even think about it. Huang Cheng, this Wuzi steel sword only costs 55,000 gold taels. Even if I offer 70,000 gold taels, you can still earn 15,000 gold taels. At the very most, you can just buy another one. Hee, Zhou Ji, since you're so capable, you can just buy one yourself. Why are you giving me the money to earn? Do you take me for a fool? It wasn't easy for the Zhang clan to release the stock for several months, but they only managed to produce 30 Wuzi steel swords. With so many people in the Imperial Army, it's impossible for them to meet the demand. Right now, they are selling for 80,000 gold taels each, and there's no market for them. If Wang Gongzi were to pay for it himself, it would be even more expensive. Upon hearing those words, Li Qingyu finally decided to stop hiding and walked into the palace. What were you all talking about? Placing his hands behind his back, Li Qingyu held onto the sword tip and walked in slowly. Lord Li, on the training field, the 3 Imperial Army members were shocked to see Li Qingyu. They hurriedly lowered their heads. In the capital, there wasn't a single Imperial Army member who didn't recognize the military affairs officer, Li Qingyu. This was their true superior. All of the equipment, armor, stipend, and weapons of the 100,000 Imperial Army members had to pass through Li Qingyu's hands. Unlike them, he could enter the royal palace to meet the emperor at any time. If they were to offend him, not even the Grand Marshal would be able to reason with them if they were to deduct their equipment. There were many people in the royal palace, and the trio didn't expect to meet this person. One must know that this person rarely interacted with them. Lord, we were only sparring with one another. We didn't do anything. Faced with Li Qingyu's questioning, the trio felt uneasy. That's not what I'm asking. Can I take a look at that sword? Li Qingyu pointed to the sword in the hands of one of the Imperial Army members. This, of course. The Imperial Guard named Huang Cheng agreed verbally, but his expression was one of extreme reluctance, as if his flesh was being cut off. He reluctantly handed over the Wuzi steel sword. Li Qingyu turned a blind eye to it and held the Wuzi steel sword in his hand. He first weighed it in his hand and then touched it. It's very heavy. Its actual weight was several times heavier than it looked. The surface is very smooth, but it's not just smooth. There are grooves on the blade, which should be designed to increase its lethality. Li Qingyu thought to himself. Once experts exchanged blows, one would know whether there was a real expert or not. Li Qing had dealt with weapons and armaments all his life. He had dealt with hundreds of thousands of weapons, so he was very familiar with the performance of weapons. There were many weapons that didn't even need to be tested. One could almost judge the quality of the weapon just by touching it, and it could even reach an extremely fine level. This meter-long sword was heavy and cold to the touch, as if touching a block of ice. The forging technique of this weapon was clearly different from that of ordinary weapons. At the very least, the weapons forged by the workshops of the royal court and the few clans in the capital weren't of this nature. This is a Wuzi steel weapon. Li Qingyu weighed the sword in his hand in bewilderment. The youngest son of the Wang clan, Wang Chong, had forged an incomparably sharp and indestructible sword at the Bluebottle Pavilion. Be it the sabers and swords of the Abbasid Caliphate, Karak Spazinu, or the famed sabers and swords of the Central Plains, none of them were a match for the Wuzi steel weapon. This legend had been spreading like wildfire in the capital 4 to 5 months ago. Naturally, Li Qingyu had heard of it as well. However, different from others, Li Qingyu had always scoffed at such rumors. He had never believed them. How could the birth of a new weapon be that simple? There was a saying that there were talents in martial arts. Some people were born smarter than others, possessing superior intelligence, superior cultivation speed, and a unique constitution. However, could it be possible for one to be born with a new forging technique? Which of the weapons that were still in existence hadn't been passed down for centuries, or even millennia? They had been perfected generation after generation. How could a brand new forging technique suddenly appear out of nowhere? Furthermore, it was able to slice through other famed swords as though they were tofu. Thus, Li Qingyu had never believed it. On top of that, the Wuzi steel weapon was extremely rare. Most people had only heard of it from legends, and only a few had seen it with their own eyes. Thus, Li Qingyu had never believed it. However, at this moment, Li Qingyu wasn't so certain. Clang! Before the trio could react, Li Qingyu's sword had already swept across the broken sword in the hands of one of the Imperial Army members. Chi! An inaudible sound echoed and the broken sword in the hands of the Imperial Army member snapped once more. The tip of the sword fell to the ground and pierced into the tiles. The trio was taken aback for a moment, but they soon recovered from their shock. Just based on the price of the Wuzi steel sword alone, it would be a miracle if the swords of the various clans in the capital could compare to it. However, Li Qingyu's perception was different. He couldn't sense the existence of the Lu clan's weapons at all. It was as though the sword had sliced through the air. This was the first time Li Qingyu had come into contact with such a weapon, and it was also the first time he experienced the sharpness of the Wuzi steel sword. Even with Li Qingyu's long experience, he had never come across such a fearsome weapon before. The sharpness of this weapon was unimaginable. Take off your armor. A thought flashed across Li Qingyu's mind, and he suddenly pointed to the armor on one of the Imperial Army members. The latter was perplexed. Yes, Lord. Even though the Imperial Army member was perplexed, he still obediently took off his armor. The military minister was in charge of the Imperial Army armory, so he had plenty of such armors. Chi-la, with a wave of his hand, the heavy armor was silently sliced into two. Clang! It fell to the ground, and the cut was as smooth as a mirror. Even though Huang Chang and the other Imperial Army members were mentally prepared, they were still shocked by Li Qingyu's actions. However, it wasn't just the Imperial Army members who were shocked. Even Li Qingyu himself was shocked. SSS. To think that it's real. Upon seeing the Wuzi steel, the first thing that came to Li Qingyu's mind was the Bluebottle Pavilion. It was said that this sword could cleave a metal mountain into two with a single slash. Those like Li Qingyu who weren't present at the scene would usually laugh it off, thinking that it was just a rumor. However, seeing was believing. Looking at the Imperial Army member's armor that was sliced into two, Li Qingyu was astounded. He didn't have the slightest bit of doubt in his heart. On the battlefield, regardless of whether it was his ally or foe, they would always use the best armor. Some of the elite heavy-armored cavalrymen wore armor forged from deep-sea Xian metal. Most of these armors were incomparably tough, and it would require 3, 4, or even more than 10 slashes to leave a mark on it. Otherwise, it would require a powerful external force to strike it. There was a limit to the parts that could be struck. There were very few armors like the Wuzi steel, which could be easily sliced apart. Li Qingyu had been in charge of the Imperial Army's weapons for more than a decade, so he was extremely sensitive to the value of weapons. Just like Zhao Fengchen, Li Qingyu immediately realized the might and value of this weapon once it was mass-produced. What did you say? This weapon costs 80,000 gold taels each. Isn't that a little too expensive? Li Qingyu stared at the trio with a deep frown on his forehead. Even if he searched through all of the sword shops in the capital, there wasn't a single sword that was as expensive as this one. Lord Li, don't think that it's too expensive. In the royal palace, there are many Imperial Army brothers who couldn't buy it even if they wanted to. Naturally, a good weapon isn't cheap. Upon hearing Li Qingyu's words, the Imperial Army member named Huang Cheng relaxed. As long as the other party wasn't picking on them, everything else was fine. Besides, don't underestimate it. Just because it costs more than 10,000 gold taels each, it's already considered cheap. Think about it, how many people are there in the Imperial Army? There are at least 100,000 of them. However, there are only 40 to 50 swords in total, and this is the production of 4 to 5 months. There aren't enough monks and gruel. How can it possibly be enough? Furthermore, this price is the price of the Zhang clan. It wasn't forged by Wang Gongzi personally. If it was forged by Wang Gongzi personally, it would be worth far more than this. Privately, it has already exceeded 100,000 gold taels. The Imperial Army member named Huang Cheng spoke gleefully. Clearly, he was proud of the fact that he had bought a Wuzi steel sword. Are there 2 other sellers of this Wuzi steel sword? Li Qingyu asked with a frown. Of course not. This is forged by Wang Gongzi and the capital's Zhang clan together. Otherwise, given Wang Gongzi's personality, wouldn't he only make 1 or 2 a month? Sometimes, he might not even make a single one at all. This time, it was another Imperial Army member who agreed with Huang Cheng. However, even though it's from the capital's Zhang clan, I heard that it's Wang Gongzi who guards the final few stages of the forging. Thus, there shouldn't be a problem with the quality. The third Imperial Army member said. Everyone in the capital knew that the production rate of Wuzi steel weapons wasn't high. If it was just Wang Cheng's capability, most of the Imperial Army members wouldn't be able to get their hands on such a powerful weapon. This was the reason why the capital's Zhang clan existed. No one minded the existence of the capital's Zhang clan at all. On the contrary, they were more than happy to see it happen. They couldn't wait for more of such weapons to appear. However, if it's Wang Gongzi who's the one, the price won't be this low. 200,000 gold taels. That was the price a few months ago. The commander bought one and treated it as a treasure. Everyone says that Wang Gongzi's weapon is priceless, and its true value probably exceeds 200,000 gold taels. In the Imperial Army, probably only the commander and the others are able to afford it. The trio couldn't conceal the envy in their eyes. Everyone knew that Wang Gongzi's weapons were unique. Every single one of them had a unique design, and lethality. Those weapons weren't just weapons, they were also exquisite works of art. Following which, Li Qingyu asked many more questions. It was as though he had discovered a brand new world. For the first time, he realized that there was a small market for Wuzi steel within the Imperial Army. For the first time, he realized that the legends of the Blue Bottle Pavilion were all true. Slowly, some ideas began to form in Li Qingyu's mind. He suddenly knew how he should report to the Holy Emperor during the inspection today. I'll be taking this Wuzi steel sword with me. Come and get it from me 7 days later. With the Wuzi steel sword in hand, Li Qingyu hurriedly headed to the Taiji Palace where the Holy Emperor resided. Thinking of the brilliant idea in his mind, Li Qingyu couldn't help but feel his blood boiling. Chapter 281. Translated by Hypersheep 325. Zhang Shouji moved swiftly. After receiving Wang Chang's support in the prescription, Zhang Shouji left the shabby alley he lived in 2 days later. He gathered a large group of workers, craftsmen, and engineers from the capital and set off for the Great Tang's southwest without a moment's rest. Leaving together with them were Wang Chang's several 100,000 gold taels and a large group of guards from the Wang clan. Zhangqiu Jianqiong and Xianyu Zhongtong had already informed them of this matter, so there should be someone to receive them when they arrived. After settling this matter for the time being, Wang Chong turned his attention back to his cultivation. Wang. In the elegant and tranquil study room, there was a table and a chair, simple and unadorned. At this very moment, Wang Chong was seated cross-legged on the floor, cultivating silently. A powerful aura slowly emanated from his body. Compared to a few days ago, it was clear that it was much stronger. Even though he had just reached Origin Energy Tier 9 Pinnacle, Wang Chang's aura wasn't as simple as it seemed. The aura he exuded didn't feel like that of an Origin Energy Realm cultivator, but that of a true martial realm expert. At this very moment, Wang Chong focused all of his attention on the Guanyuan, Beikei, Fengping, and Luanli acupoints in his body. In a dimension invisible to the naked eye, surges of origin energy flowed through Wang Chang's body. Then, as though an ocean gushing into a small canal, they flowed into the miniature circulation within these acupoints. True Martial Little Dipper. This was the name of this miniature circulation that only a few people knew of. Under normal circumstances, it would take 1 to 2 years to advance from Origin Energy Tier 9 to true martial realm. Even the most talented martial arts genius would require at least half a year. But of course, it was rare for someone like his little sister to possess innate divine strength, with the exception of 8 characters of Yin. True Martial Little Dipper was such a technique. It was used in the later generations to help Origin Energy Realm cultivators reach true martial realm as quickly as possible. Even in the future, not many people knew about this technique. As for now, other than Wang Chong, no one else knew. The true martial realm was different from the Origin Energy Realm. The biggest difference was that almost all true martial realm martial artists could release their internal qi, and it was no longer limited to their bodies. But when Yuan Qi was used in actual combat, the nature was completely different. It became even more ferocious and destructive. This kind of origin Qi was called stellar energy. When a true martial realm expert made a move, the martial halos that burst out of their bodies were almost all Gang Qis. The nature of this thing was different from Wang Chang's vital energy. What Wang Chong was doing now was making use of the true martial Little Dipper's tiny circulation to compress the Yuan Qi in his body and change its nature, making it even more powerful. Then, he would use the astral energy to transform his body and make himself stronger. In other words, the true martial Little Dipper could allow Wang Chong to possess true martial level stellar energy at the essence energy realm. It was just that the amount was not as great. This was the advantage of this technique. Congratulations to user for successfully developing an elementary quality rice. You are rewarded with 50 destiny energy. Just as Wang Chong was silently cultivating, a familiar voice suddenly sounded in his head. At the same time, something seemed to have surged into his head, and Wang Chong immediately felt that something was amiss. Wang Chong exclaimed in surprise. He slowly opened his eyes, and a sharp glint reminiscent of the stars in the night sky flashed across his eyes. What's going on? Isn't 50 destiny energy a little too much? Wang Chong was bewildered. He was originally in the middle of cultivating, and this sudden turn of events was really unexpected. Zhang Munian's side has produced results so quickly. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed across Wang Chong's head. Needless to say, Wang Chong knew that this must be Zhang Munian's doing. Thinking about it, it had only been 4 to 5 months since he arrived at Jiaoji, and yet, he had already managed to develop an elementary quality rice. This was truly inconceivable. One must know that in the other world, this step would have taken 4 to 5 years. Could it be due to the climate of Jiaoji? Wang Chong fell into deep thought. To the people of the Tang dynasty, Jiaoji was far from the royal court, and it was definitely a remote and desolate place. However, there was no better place than Jiaoji for the selection of good crops. There was ample sunlight, and the climate was mild. Crops could be grown 3 times a year. Compared to other places where rice could only be grown once a year, Jiaoji was clearly a paradise. Furthermore, with Wang Chang's guidance, Zhang Munyan had indeed avoided many detours. Even so, 4 to 5 months still left Wang Chong surprised. That fellow sure is hard-working. Suddenly understanding something, Wang Chong inwardly sighed. He heard that Zhang Munyan had been eating and sleeping outside ever since he arrived at Jiaoji. He didn't return to the residence that was arranged for him at all. The only reason why he was able to produce such results so quickly was due to his hard work. There's no mention of hybrid rice. It only says that it's elementary superior rice, so it's likely that he hasn't succeeded yet. Just that, I wonder how much he managed to raise the yield of the rice. Wang Chong pondered. This world was filled with powerful martial arts, and the top-notch martial artists possessed strength comparable to gods. However, it was a pity that no matter how formidable a martial artist was, he couldn't make a move on a place like rice. Thus, even though the world was prosperous and peaceful, the yield of rice wasn't high. It wasn't at the level of 1,000 caddies per mu, 2 to 3,000 caddies, or even 3 to 4,000 caddies per mu. Without sufficient rations, the population wasn't as large. The entire Tang dynasty only had a population of 50 million or so. It wasn't at the scale of 100 million like in the future. This was also the reason why Wang Chong sought out Zhang Munyan to change this situation. Without a large population and rations, it was impossible for them to succeed in the future battlefield. But isn't this reward a little too generous? It's only elementary superior rice, far from hybrid rice. Yet, it's already rewarded with 50 destiny energy. This is truly inconceivable. Compared to Zhang Munyan's speed, what shocked Wang Chong the most at this moment was the content of the voice in his head. 50 destiny energy. Wasn't this reward way too generous? Wang Chong clearly remembered that the rewards for changing the fate of his clan and the regional commander's incident weren't this generous. Could it be that Zhang Munyan's rice was more important than the regional commander's incident and the survival of the Wang clan? A bizarre expression appeared on Wang Chang's face. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. He had taken a huge risk in the matter regarding Yao Guangyi and the regional commander's incident, but the reward he received was even less than Zhang Munyan's elementary research in Jiaoji. It was truly an indescribable feeling. I understand now. After a moment of contemplation, Wang Chong soon came to a realization. So, it's still because of the influence of the incident, right? The matter at the vast crane pavilion only affected the Wang clan. Compared to the world, it didn't mean much at all. On the other hand, the regional commander's incident had a much greater influence, and it attracted the attention of the royal court. Thus, the reward was slightly greater. If I had completed it perfectly back then, the reward wouldn't have been any lesser than this. As for Zhang Munyan's elementary superior rice. Food is the first priority of the people, and this is an incident that will influence the world for generations to come. There's nothing that could be more influential than this. If not for Zhang Munyan's recent breakthrough, the reward would have been far more than this. Upon understanding this point, Wang Chong couldn't help but feel delighted. The 50 destiny energy was an unexpected gain. More importantly, Zhang Munyan was still far from creating a true hybrid rice. In other words, he would be able to obtain an endless supply of destiny energy from this incident. This was an unexpected gain. Up till now, this was the easiest and largest reward that Wang Chong had received. From the consort Tai Jin incident and the regional commander's incident, Wang Chong had received a total of 50 destiny energy. After deducting the destiny energy from the second world constraint, he was left with 15 points. Not too long ago, he had encircled the Gogurians and killed 3 Gogurian generals. Including King Sojurim, he had received 25 destiny energy. Adding the 50 destiny energy that he had just received, Wang Chong had a total of 90 destiny energy on him. This was not a small amount of wealth. Just thinking about it made Wang Chong feel delighted. With so many destiny energy, I should be able to exchange for that item. Suddenly recalling a matter, Wang Chong quickly communicated with the Stone of Destiny in his mind. Of the 5 destinies, Wang Chong opened the physique, which represented the body. Upon seeing the Destiny Battle Armor option, Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat, and his soul seemed to have left his body. I really want to see what the Destiny Battle Armor looks like. Wang Chong's heart was in turmoil. He really wanted to exchange for the Destiny Battle Armor right now. Steed, weapon, and armor, these were the 3 things that could protect one's life on the battlefield. Wang Chong had everything on him, but he didn't have a suitable armor. The Destiny Battle Armor cost 80 points, and with the amount of points Wang Chong had on him, he could easily exchange for it. However, Wang Chong only thought about it for a moment before dispelling the thought. The 3rd restriction of the world force is coming soon. If I exchange for this battle armor, I won't have enough points at that time. 10 destiny energy isn't enough to clear this trial. By then, I'll really be dead. Wang Chong took in a deep breath. Even though he was reluctant to part with it, he still turned to the last line. Gold organs. This was a new reward from the Stone of Destiny. It would only appear when one had 100 points and above. In his mind, the explanation for the gold organs was: after exchanging for the gold organs, the rate of absorption of World Essence Chi and recovery of World Essence Chi had greatly increased. This was exactly what Wang Chong needed right now. With a thought, Wang Chong decisively exchanged for the gold organs. Chapter 282. Hong Long. Just when Wang Chong thought that this was the end of the transformation, there was a sudden jolt. A majestic and heavy energy reminiscent of golden fluid gushed into Wang Chong's chest from the void and into every single one of his lungs. For an instant, Wang Chong felt as though he was suffocating. That intense energy was scalding, viscous, and scorching. It filled every single one of his lungs and cells, leaving Wang Chong unable to breathe at all. The heavy weight increased the pressure on his lungs and upper body significantly, such that he felt as though he was going to collapse. Wang! Just when Wang Chong felt that he was on the verge of collapsing, the heavy and scorching golden fluid suddenly shot out, revealing an opening. As though a drowning man, Wang Chong struggled to rise to the surface. SSS. In the study, Wang Chong took in a deep breath. Even the maids and servants shuttling to and fro outside the room could hear him clearly. Ah! How unbearable! As expected, it isn't that easy to obtain powerful energy. Wang Chong thought as his body heaved up and down violently. The 5 viscera and 6 bowels were the softest and weakest existences in the human body, and it was also an area that was extremely difficult to cultivate. Even the strongest experts could only strengthen their 5 viscera and 6 bowels slightly due to the existence of origin energy. As for cultivation techniques that focused on strengthening the 5 viscera and 6 bowels, there was no such thing. This was also the first time Wang Chong had encountered such a thing. In terms of strengthening one's physical body, the golden organs was definitely one of the best physical body strengthening techniques out there, even surpassing the dragon bone art. Back then, when Wang Chong first saw this reward in the Stone of Destiny, he couldn't help but feel delighted, and he was tempted to exchange for it. But back then, due to the restraints of the world energy, Wang Chong dared not exchange for it at all. It was only when Zhang Munian's elementary superior Rice appeared that his wish was fulfilled. Buzz! His body was warm. As he breathed heavily, Wang Chong could clearly feel the golden liquid from the hundreds of large and small alveoli in his chest seeping into his heart, liver, spleen, kidneys, and other internal organs. The boiling energy flowed into every cell, and finally, it slowly merged with the cells in these places. An experience he had never experienced before surged into his heart. Wang Chong felt that his body was as light as a feather, and it was getting lighter. Not only that, but as the energy of the golden juice organs continued to fuse with his body, Yang Ji also had a strange feeling in his heart, as if he was soaking in water. This feeling wasn't obvious at first, but it grew stronger and stronger as time went on. It was as if he wasn't surrounded by air, but a viscous liquid. So this is the golden viscera. Wang Chong slowly sensed the changes in his body and finally understood why the golden organs could change the affinity between a martial artist and heaven-earth yuan qi. In the past, although Wang Chong could feel the existence of heaven-earth yuan qi, it was only a feeling, and it was subjective. But now it was different. Wang Chong felt that he could even touch it with his palm, as if he was touching something real. Not only that, Wang Chong could even feel the flow of energy in the air. However, the range of this perception was not large, only about 5 or 6 shang. But this was already very powerful. Even a true martial realm or profound martial realm martial artist might not be able to do this. This is really inconceivable. The Stone of Destiny's ability is completely different from the world of martial arts. Many of its abilities can't be estimated with common sense. Wang Chong shook his head and praised in his heart. He stretched out a finger, and a stream of energy that was hard to see with the naked eye flowed through the air. It was easily wrapped around by Wang Chong's fingertip, and then absorbed into his body. Although the amount of energy absorbed was not a lot, this kind of purposeful and targeted absorption of yuan qi was much more efficient than normal. If he wanted to, Wang Chong could absorb all the yuan qi within 5 or 6 shang in an instant. In an intense battle where both sides' yuan qi was exhausted, this kind of ability would be decisive. Buzz! Standing alone in the study, he closed his eyes and spread his legs apart, motionless. Once the energy of the gold organs in his chest had completely dispersed into his 5 viscera, everything calmed down. Only then did Wang Chong slowly open his eyes. The energy in his body had completely calmed down. Compared to before, Wang Chong could feel that his 5 viscera and 6 bowels were stronger, more resilient, and could withstand greater impacts. Compared to a martial artist of the same level, his 5 viscera and 6 bowels were at least 7 or 8 times stronger. Strange, it seems like my body's strength has increased by quite a bit. Wang Chong's eyes lit up. He suddenly moved his arms, feeling that his strength had increased by quite a bit. He was secretly pleasantly surprised. The gold organs only targeted the internal organs of a martial artist. Not only could it strengthen the heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys, it could also increase one's strength. This was an unexpected gain. But if this is the case, coupled with the true martial Little Dipper, it will be much easier for me to reach the true martial realm in the future. My strength will also be much stronger. Wang Chong closed his eyes and muttered to himself. 100 feet tall building is built from the earth. The foundation of a building was often determined from the very beginning. If the foundation was unstable, it would be useless no matter how hard one tried to reinforce it. With a lifetime's worth of martial arts experience, Wang Chong couldn't be clearer on this point. It's about time. That person should be here by now. After meditating for another hour in the room and stabilizing his cultivation, Wang Chong glanced at the hourglass on the table before walking out of the study. How is it? Has Lord Zhang arrived? Wang Chong looked at the Wang clan guard outside the study and asked. Reporting to Gongzi, Governor Zhang has just arrived, and he's already waiting in the lounge. The servants have already prepared top-notch tea and pastries. Knowing that Gongzi is cultivating in the study, Madam is already there to receive you. She said that Gongzi will meet the governor immediately after you are done cultivating. The guard outside bowed respectfully. Clearly, he was sent by Wang Chong's mother, and he had been waiting here for quite some time now. I understand. You may leave now. Wang Chong nodded. Flinging his sleeves, he headed straight for the study. Jiannan Governor Zhang Wentuo was an influential figure. Even though his standing couldn't compare to Zhangqiu Jianxiong, the protector general of the empire, in Wang Chang's heart, he was definitely one of the most important figures in this life. Back at the banquet, due to Zhangqiu Jianxiong's invitation and the fact that he was ambushed by the Gogurians, Wang Chong didn't find it appropriate to talk to him. It was just that Zhang Xian remembered the other party's face and made an appointment with the Jiannan prefect 2 days ago. The time was set by Wang Chong, and since this was their first meeting, Wang Chong didn't want to leave a good impression on the Jiannan governor. Thus, he chose the time carefully. Passing through many gardens, ponds, and corridors, Wang Chong finally met Zhang Wentuo in the lounge of the Wang clan. There was a faint fragrance of tea in the room. When Wang Chong walked in, his mother was chatting with the Jiannan governor, who had come to the capital to report on his work. Upon seeing Wang Chong enter, Madame Wang immediately stood up from her seat. "Chonger, it's rare for Lord Governor to visit our Wang clan as a guest." Madame Wang seemed to have a good impression of the governor of Jiannan. After leaving those words behind, she left with her maids and servants. "Lord Governor." Wang Chong straightened his robe, straightened his expression, walked over, and gave a respectful bow. "You're too polite, Chong Gongzi." Zhang Wentuo hurriedly stood up from his seat and returned the greeting. While returning the greeting, Zhang Wentuo assessed the legendary Gongzi of the capital in astonishment. In a place like the capital, Zhang Wentuo was definitely a legendary figure. Many of the things that he had done were inconceivable even to an adult like Zhang Wentuo. However, Zhang Wentuo couldn't understand why this legendary Gongzi of the capital would invite him over. He had lived in Jiannan for a long time, and other than the annual reporting on his work, he had never spent much time in the capital. As such, he had never interacted with this Wang Gongzi before him. The Wang clan was a clan of ministers and generals, and Duke Jiao was an esteemed and virtuous minister. Under normal circumstances, Zhang Wentuo wouldn't be able to associate with such a prestigious clan. Only Protector General Zhangqiu Jianxiong was qualified to interact with them. Zhang Wentuo couldn't understand why Wang Gongzi would bring him up when they had never met before. Not only that, he even brought him up at Protector General Zhangqiu Jianxiong's banquet, even issuing such a bizarre invitation 2 days ago. The main reason why Zhang Wentuo agreed to the invitation was due to this doubt. He's indeed a ferocious man. While Zhang Wentuo was assessing him, Wang Chong was doing the same as well. Even though there were many governors in the Tang dynasty, the one before him would definitely become the most famous one in a few years' time, leaving his name in the annals of history. Even though it was all because of his dishonorable conduct which was known to the world. 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty, hundreds of thousands of civilians, a war that shook the entire Central Plains, and a war that would change the fate of the Tang dynasty and the surrounding powers, all of this was because of the dishonorable actions of this Jiannan prefect. If the fall of the Tang dynasty could be described as a chain reaction of dominoes, then Zhang Wentuo, the Jiannan prefect, would be the first one to fall. For any shocking event, there would always be a fuse that would be lit first. And Zhang Wentuo was the one who had lit this fuse. There was only a thin line between peace and war. It was this person who had single-handedly ended the 200 years of peace of the Tang dynasty, leading the country into a chaotic future. If chaos and destruction had to have a person who would sound the death knell, then this person before him was definitely that person. Just that, Zhang Wentuo himself probably didn't know of this matter. Other than Wang Chong, no one else in the entire Tang dynasty knew of this matter. However, he was different from those who hated Zhang Wentuo to the core. Chapter 283. Translated by Hypersheep 325. Zhang Wentuo was a tall and burly man with a squarish face. From him, Wang Chong could sense an intense militaristic aura. It was the same aura that he felt from his father and the regular soldiers. Looking at the figure before him, Wang Chong found it hard to believe that this was the man who coveted the wife and daughter of King Jelifeng of Mengxi Zhao. Seizing the opportunity when they arrived at the capital, he lured them into the city lord manor to rape and murder them. Eventually, in a fit of rage, King Jelifeng mobilized the entire Mengshi Zhao to exact vengeance for his wife and daughter, thus launching an attack on Great Tang. In the end, that massive war that shook the entire Tang dynasty. Jelifeng might have been ambitious, but if not for the provocation of his wife and daughter's death, he might not have been so bold as to mobilize the entire empire to launch such a massive war. More importantly, no matter how ambitious Jelifeng was, only the Tang dynasty could deal with him. But his wife and daughter were innocent. As the Jiannan commander-in-chief, Zhang Wentua's actions were deeply shameful, even to ordinary people. This caused the Tang dynasty to lose its moral high ground, and it also lost the excuse to deal with Mengshi Zhao in the future. In fact, even the people of Jiannan who suffered the most after the 180,000 soldiers died in the war were filled with sympathy for King Jelifeng of Mengshi Zhao. Such a ridiculous matter had never happened before in any of the dynasties before the Tang dynasty. As the instigator of all of this, Zhang Wentua became the sinner of the Tang dynasty, and he was hated by everyone. As these thoughts flashed across Wang Chang's mind, he quickly regained his composure. "Lord, this way please." Wang Chong calmly suppressed his thoughts and gestured Jiannan Prefecture Chief Zhang Qiantua to sit back down. "Wang Gongzi, I'm indebted to you for taking care of me. May I know why you invited me to your residence?" Zhang Wentua had the style of a soldier, so he didn't like to beat around the bush. After seeing Wang Chong for a few seconds, he immediately went straight to the point. I wonder how the governor and the protector general are doing in the capital." Wang Chong didn't mention the reason why he invited Zhang Wentua over. Instead, he asked him about the matter regarding the emperor's visit to the royal palace. As he spoke, he picked up the teapot on the table and poured himself a cup of tea. Fortunately, His Majesty didn't say anything. "If nothing goes wrong, I should be returning to Jiannan in a few days' time." Zhang Wentua frowned, but he didn't say anything. "So fast?" Wang Chong was surprised. It had only been a few days since Zhang Wentua arrived in the capital, so it was truly surprising that he would return to Jiannan so quickly. "I came to the capital this time mainly for Protector General. Now that the report is done, it's time to go back," Zhang Wentua explained patiently. He had never been a person who was good at socializing. Even in Jiannan, he didn't get along well with Protector General Zhangqiu Jianqiong and General Xianyu Zhongtong, needless to say, Wang Chong. The southwest isn't as prosperous and affluent as the capital. Since it's rare for Lord to come to the capital, why don't you stay here for a while longer? This way, Wang Chong can play his role as the host. The Silk Flower Pavilion in the west of the city is a place where scholars and refined guests visit. Since Lord is always in a hurry, why don't you have Wang Chong bring you to the Silk Flower Pavilion? As Wang Chong spoke, he assessed Zhang Wentua carefully, not letting go of the slightest change in his expression. His eyes were filled with probing intent. "Wang Gongzi." Unexpectedly, right after Wang Chong said those words, Zhang Wentua suddenly bellowed and stood up. His eyes were cold and filled with rage. "I, Jing Gongzi, am a descendant of Duke Jiu. That's why I'm here. I didn't expect Gongzi to bring me to that despicable brothel. Wang Gongzi, I've misjudged you. If there's nothing else, I'll be taking my leave." At this point, his face was filled with displeasure. Wang Chong's words had truly left him astonished. Silk Flower Pavilion sounded pleasant, but it was actually a famous brothel in the capital. Even someone like him, who rarely went there, knew of it, needless to say, others. Zhang Wentua didn't expect Wang Chong to invite him to a brothel. Perhaps it was a trend among the scholars in the capital, but it definitely wasn't him. What kind of person did he think he was? At this point, anger flashed in Zhang Wentua's eyes. Lord, please forgive me. I was just casually mentioning the Silk Flower Pavilion. Since Lord isn't fond of it, just pretend that Wang Chong didn't say anything. I have misunderstood Lord, and I apologized to Lord Prefecture Chief. I beseech Lord Prefecture Chief to forgive me. Wang Chong had been staring at Zhang Wentua the entire time, and upon seeing Zhang Wentua getting angry and getting up to leave, a glint flashed across Wang Chong's eyes. Silk Flower Pavilion? Of course it couldn't be true. This was where he was, and his mother wasn't too far away. How could Wang Chong invite Zhang Wentua to a brothel? This was just a probe. Zhang Wentua was angry, and he was truly furious. However, as the one who started it all, Wang Chong was delighted. At the very least, there was one thing that Wang Chong was certain of. Zhang Wentua wasn't a lecherous person. Regardless of whether it was his personality or his way of doing things, it was the straightforward style of a regular soldier of the Tang dynasty. Wang Chong was straightforward. Knowing that he had made a mistake, he stood up and bowed respectfully to Zhang Wentua to apologize. For a moment, Zhang Wentua didn't take it too seriously. After all, Wang Chong was only 15. Under Wang Chong's persistent pestering, Zhang Wentua could only return to his seat. Lord Zhang, actually, the reason why I invited you here is because I have a request, and I hope that Lord Prefecture Chief can agree to it. Wang Chong said. Oh. Gongzi, feel free to speak your mind. Zhang Wentua turned to Wang Chong said. It's regarding the Lion Rock Ridge. Hasn't Lord Prefecture Chief already agreed to Gongzi's request? Zhang Wentua asked in astonishment. Jiannan Road is far from here, and building a base requires a huge amount of resources and time. In this aspect, Lord Prefecture Chief isn't able to provide much help. This is Wang Chong's first time in Jiannan, so I hope that Lord Prefecture Chief can lend me some help. Wang Chong said earnestly. If Gongzi wishes to build anything, feel free to speak. I might just be able to help you in this aspect. Zhang Wentua pondered for a moment before nodding. The Lion Rock Mountain was located far away, and the Wang clan was a clan of generals and ministers. If they were to build a base there, it would definitely cost a lot of resources, so they could only use local materials. If that was the case, it would be beneficial to Jiannan's economy as well. As such, Zhang Wentua didn't mind helping Wang Chong. Following that, Wang Chong and Zhang Wentua chatted a lot about the specifics. Although it was announced to the public that it was to build a base for trading on the Tea-Horse Road. However, only Wang Chong knew that it was a huge city. From this aspect, it could be said that Zhang Wentua, the prefect of this place, was indeed a great help. Moreover, with his help, Zhang Shouji's work over there would be much smoother, and the construction time would be greatly advanced. The latter was what Wang Chong valued the most. Young master. Just as Wang Chong and Zhang Wentua were chatting excitedly, the sound of hurried footsteps suddenly sounded from outside. Following which, a loud bang sounded and the door was pushed open from the outside. A green-robed servant rushed in and interrupted the conversation between Wang Chong and Zhang Wentua. Wang Chong frowned. Didn't he say it before? When there are guests in the house, do not disturb. Young master, the great master is here. He said that he has something important to tell you and wants you to see him immediately. The green-clothed servant was panting, and before Wang Chong could reprimand him, he spoke first. Wang Chong was taken aback. There was no such thing as a great old master in the Wang clan. There was only one person whom the servants would address as such, and that was Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen. Why is uncle here? Wang Chong asked doubtfully. At this time, he should be busy dealing with Zhangqiu Jianqiong. The dispute over the Minister of War's position was currently at its peak, so he shouldn't be busy at all. Why would he come to Wang Chong's residence? On top of that, he even had a servant call him over, saying that he had something important to discuss with him. Wang Gongzi, since you have matters to attend to, I won't disturb you any longer. I'll be taking my leave first. If there's anything you need, feel free to contact me in the future. Understanding Wang Chong's intentions, Zhang Wentua immediately stood up and bade farewell. Wang Chong pondered for a moment before nodding. After sending Zhang Wentua off, Wang Chong summoned Solitary Wolf. Gongzi, you were looking for me? Solitary Wolf walked over and asked. I have something for you to do. Do you still remember that we are going to build a base in Jiannan's Lion Rock Ridge? Wang Chong said. Lord, you wish for me to oversee the construction of the Lion Rock Ridge? That's not it. Wang Chong shook his head without any hesitation. I want you to follow Jiannan Prefecture Chief Zhang Wentua in my name. No matter what, I want you to stay within the Prefecture Chief manor. If possible, befriend the Jiannan Prefecture Chief's children and stay within the Prefecture Chief manor to observe the happenings there. No matter what happens in there, I want you to send me a messenger pigeon every 10 days, 3 a month. If anything happens, you have to inform me separately. Ah! Lone Wolf exclaimed in a low voice, completely stunned. He didn't expect that Wang Chong would entrust him with such a task. Solitary Wolf, I'm not asking you to be a spy. This matter is extremely important. Can you do it? As he said those words, Wang Chong's expression was incomparably solemn. Gongzi, rest assured. As long as it's Gongzi's orders, I'll definitely accomplish it. Solitary Wolf replied without any hesitation. They were indebted to Wang Chong, and if not for him, they would have to live with humiliation for the rest of their lives. Putting aside such a small matter, Wang Chong would definitely accomplish it no matter how difficult it was. There's one more thing. I want you to keep an eye on Jiannan Prefecture Chief Zhang Wentua at all times. If anything happens to the Prefecture Chief manor, or if Zhang Wentua tries to commit suicide, I want you to bring him out of Jiannan in the Prefecture Chief manor no matter what. Can you do this? Hearing Wang Chong's words, Solitary Wolf's expression suddenly turned bizarre. Ever since he retired 15 years ago, Solitary Wolf had accepted countless jobs as a mercenary. But Solitary Wolf had never heard of such a bizarre request before. Why would something happen to the Prefecture Chief manor? That was the Prefecture Chief manor, not some ordinary place. Which madman would be so crazy as to lay his hands on the Prefecture Chief manor? Furthermore, Zhang Wentua was a perfectly fine person, so why would he commit suicide? He had also taken a look before he left the manor. That person had a well-built body and was filled with vitality. When he walked, he exuded a majestic aura that even demons would have to avoid. Why would such a person commit suicide? Solitary Wolf had weathered countless storms in his life, but he had never encountered such a bizarre matter. Yes, Gongzi. I'll get it done now. Even though Solitary Wolf was doubtful, he didn't hesitate in the slightest. Gongzi, rest assured. I'll treat it as a job, and no matter what, I'll definitely complete the task Gongzi has entrusted to me. Chapter 284. After settling the matters in the southwest, Wang Chong went alone to see his big uncle, Wang Zhen Chonger, the Imperial Army's Director of Military Affairs. Li Qingyu has come to see me. He wants to buy your Wuzi steel sword. Upon seeing Wang Chong, Wang Zhen immediately went straight to the point. What? Wang Chong had only just stepped into the hall when he heard these words, and his entire body froze in shock. And then an indescribable ecstasy swept over him like a raging tide, engulfing him. Li Qingyu. Upon hearing this name, Wang Chong knew that the thing he had been hoping for the most had happened, the imperial court's purchase. Even without the memories of his last life, Wang Chong deeply understood what this name signified. In the Tang dynasty, the name Li Qingyu was associated with only one thing: purchase. Whether it was the Zhang, Lu, Huang, or Qing clans of the capital, or the swordsmiths and shops of the capital, once the imperial army's purchase was involved, it would be the personal responsibility of the Director of Military Affairs, Li Qingyu. Wang Chong had heard the head of the Zhang clan mention this several times. But to Wang Chong, this name had a special meaning that only he knew. It was precisely this director of military affairs, Li Qingyu, who had led the largest purchase of Wuxi steel in the history of the Central Plains in his last life. Although that purchase had failed for various reasons, it had been forever engraved in history. Based on his calculations, it should have been another 1 or 2 years before this matter would occur. Wang Chong was not at all surprised that this matter had occurred so early. The only thing he had not expected was for it to happen so quickly. 2 days ago, he had sent a message to the capital's Zhang clan, making an exception and allowing them to purchase 30 Wuxi steel swords a month. His goal was to expand his influence in the imperial army. Their ultimate target was Li Qingyu, the military affairs officer of the imperial army who was in charge of the purchase of military equipment in the palace. Wang Chong believed that as long as the military affairs officer, who held an important position in the imperial army, saw his Wuxi steel weapon with his own eyes, he would definitely win his favor. If Li Qingyu did not have a special fondness for Wuxi steel weapons, he would not have spent so much effort and money to convince the imperial court to purchase Wuxi steel. However, Wang Chong did not expect Li Qingyu to act so quickly. It had only been 2 days, but Wang Chong had already made his move, even inviting his big uncle Wang Zhen over. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect this. This is really a pleasant surprise. Wang Chong clenched his fists tightly, feeling extremely excited. Wuxi steel was very precious and could bring in a lot of profits. However, this kind of profit had its limits. The rarer an object is, the greater its value. Even though the weapon that Wang Chong sold to the Grand Marshal of the Imperial Army was worth 200,000 gold taels, this was something that the commoners would never dream of. However, he could only sell a single such weapon every month. Furthermore, there was no guarantee that it would appear in the future. It would take Wang Chong an entire year to earn 2 million gold taels, and what Wang Chong lacked the most at this moment was time. There was nothing faster than selling it to the imperial court. Not everyone was able to afford 200,000 gold taels for a single weapon like the Grand Marshal of the Imperial Army. However, the imperial court was different. The potential of the imperial court was nearly limitless. In Wang Chong's plan, the best seller for the Hyderabad ores was the imperial court. However, he had to grasp this opportunity well. If it was too early, the Wuxi steel would be worthless. The imperial court might not be willing to buy it, and they wouldn't be able to afford it either. Now was the best time to do so. Wang Gongzi, nice to meet you. Under big uncle Wang Zhen's lead, Wang Chong met with the famous director of military affairs, Li Qingyu, in the Jade Tavern in the west of the city. Lord Li, you're being too polite. Wang Chong smiled. As he spoke, he sat down opposite of Li Qingyu with a dignified expression. Director of military affairs, Li Qingyu, was an elusive existence in the Tang dynasty. His activities were mostly within the royal palace, and his movements were extremely discreet. Even when he visited the prestigious swordsmithing clans, he would come and go in a hurry, taking less than an incense's time. Even though Wang Chong had heard of his name, this was his first time meeting him. Lord Wang should have told you about it, right? Li Qingyu's style of doing things was extremely straightforward. As soon as he sat down, he went straight to the point. The imperial court wishes to purchase 1,000 Wuxi steel weapons from Gongzi. Since Lord Li is so straightforward, I'll be frank as well. I'm unable to purchase 1,000 Wuxi steel weapons. Wang Chong shrugged with a smile. Oh, why? Is it because the price is too low? A glint flashed across Li Qingyu's eyes. Pardon my bluntness, but it's impossible for the imperial court to purchase the weapons at the same price as Gongzi's. 20,000 gold taels for a single weapon isn't a low price. Indeed, given the current market for Wuxi steel weapons that Wang Chong had a grasp of, 20,000 gold taels for a single weapon was indeed a low price. However, this had always been the case for the imperial court's purchases. Ha ha ha, Lord Li misunderstands. Wang Chong chuckled. It's not that I'm unwilling, but that I can't sell them. Oh. Why? Because I only have 100 ingots of Wuzi steel. Wang Chong chuckled. From Arloja and Ablonodon, Wang Chong had only obtained 300 jun in total. Yet, Li Qingyu wanted 1,000 ingots here. How could he possibly have so many? No matter how high Li Qingyu's price was, he couldn't afford it. However, the reason why Wang Chong invited Li Qingyu over wasn't to talk about this. Pardon my bluntness, but the reason why Lord Li wants these Wuzi steel weapons is because you want to build an army of Wuzi steel weapons, right? However, is 1,000 weapons really enough? Wang Chong chuckled. The people of the Tang dynasty were truly intelligent. Imperial Army Commander Zhao Fengchen had mentioned to him more than once about the possibilities of building an army with Wuzi steel weapons. It was the same for Li Qingyu as well. At first glance, these people were able to recognize the military value of the sharp Wuzi steel. And this was what the future Abbasid Caliphate did. Anyone who saw the Wuzi steel weapons would immediately realize the immense military value it held. This, Li Qingyu was taken aback. He had only intended to purchase a batch of weapons to test it out with the Imperial Army. He hadn't thought about the details. Lord Li, 1,000 men is definitely insufficient to build an army of Wuzi steel weapons. Furthermore, 20,000 gold taels per weapon is indeed a little low. However, if Lord Li is willing to pay me 8 million gold taels in advance, I might be able to find a way to equip an army of 10,000 men within 5 years. In fact, I can even lower the price of the Wuzi steel weapons to 18,000 gold taels for you. Wang Chong said. By the side, Wang Chong's big uncle frowned. However, Li Qingyu's eyes lit up. The 10,000 Wuzi steel weapons that Wang Chong mentioned were secondary. What caught his attention was Wang Chong's 18,000 gold taels. Is 8 million gold taels sufficient? Li Qingyu asked. It was just an ordinary sentence, but it sounded powerful and domineering in the cluster of Jade Tavern. Even Wang Chong couldn't help but look at Wang Chong in awe. He sure is rich. Wang Chong thought. This was the difference between the military affairs supervisor of the royal court and the prestigious clans. 8 million taels of gold was a huge sum of money even for the great clans in the capital. It was an unbearably huge sum. However, to the military affairs supervisor of the Imperial Army, who often made large purchases, it was nothing more than a drizzle. As the military affairs supervisor of the Imperial Army, Li Qingyu had the backing of the entire Tang dynasty. This was the difference brought about by the weight class. The more Wang Chong thought about it, the more he felt that his plan and rules were correct. Li Qingyu reached an agreement with Wang Chong at the fastest speed possible, and he made use of this opportunity to have Wang Chong write down the contents of his promise on a document. Words were no proof, and documents were the only proof. As the military affairs supervisor, Li Qingyu was already used to it. Chonger, why did you agree to his request? Won't we be making a huge loss this way? Walking out of the cluster of Jade Tavern, Wang Chong's big uncle, Wang Zhen, couldn't help but ask. The Wang clan was bound together for good and bad. Even though the one who was going to lose out was Wang Chong, Wang Zhen didn't think that he had nothing to do with this matter. Big uncle, he has already come knocking on our door. Do you think that we can still reject him? Wang Chong chuckled. This, Wang Zhen was taken aback. If it was just Li Qingyu, he wouldn't have cared at all. He could have just rejected him. However, Wang Zhen knew that the one standing behind Li Qingyu was the Holy Emperor. This was also the reason why Wang Zhen didn't say a single word throughout the entire tavern. Big uncle, don't worry. We won't be losing out on this matter. Wang Chong consoled with a smile. He knew what his big uncle was conflicted about. The reason why Li Qingyu went to Wang Zhen instead of looking for him or big uncle Li Lin in the Imperial Army was to lower his price. This was also the reason why his big uncle was conflicted. However, Wang Chong was different. He wasn't too worried about this matter. 5 years. Who knows what will happen in 5 years? As Wang Chong spoke those words that only he could hear, he couldn't help but sigh in awe. 10,000 weapons in 5 years, even Li Qingyu probably didn't realize the significance of the deal he had just struck with Wang General. Too many things could happen in 5 years. If that calamity didn't happen within 5 years, if he was still alive after 5 years, he might just be able to fulfill his deal with Li Qingyu. Shaking his head, Wang Chong quickly recovered from his daze. 8 million gold taels. I'll have to spend at least 3 to 5 million gold taels on Lion City. The rest can be used to carry out the next step of my plan. After bidding farewell to big uncle Wang Zhen, Wang Chong gazed at the clouds in the sky, and his heart was in turmoil. The Lion City of Jiannan was a bottomless pit. Before him, there had never been a case of a private city being constructed in the Tang dynasty. Given the capabilities of a single person, this was still too much of a burden. But in Wang Chong's heart, the Lion City was the most important thing to him at the moment. No matter how much money he had to spend, he was determined to carry it out. This was also the reason why he requested an advance payment of several million gold taels from the Imperial Army. All kinds of barriers, defenses, rations, and even the repair of weapons, there were simply too many things involved. Even 5 million gold taels might not be enough. But even so, with this sum of money, he should be able to achieve the effect he wanted. Now, it was time for him to move on to the next matter. Chapter 285. Translated by Hypersheep 325. Wang Chong received Ablonidin and Ablonidin in his residence. It had been a long time since they last met, and the two monks had clearly gotten much tanner, as if they had been exposed to the sun. After Wang Chong spent several months in the Kunwu training camp, the two of them returned to Sinlu. One reason was that they needed to report to the high priest, and the other reason was that Sinlu was currently experiencing a rare civil war. How could the two of them remain idle over such a major matter? No matter what, they had to return to take a look. Gongzi. Upon seeing Wang Chong, the two monks immediately clasped their hands together and bowed deeply. What was even more surprising was that the two monks, who usually only spoke Sindhi, were actually speaking to Wang Chong in the unfamiliar language of the Central Plains. From this, one could easily imagine how much respect they had for him. He, great monk, there's no need to be so polite. Wang Chong waved his hands with a smile. Ablonidin and Ablonidin had stayed in the Wang Chong residence for a period of time, and they had even taught Wang Chong the tortoise breathing art and arm connection art. As a result, Wang Chong was already on good terms with them. When they first met, they would still call him Grandmaster, but as their relationship grew closer, they would just call him Great Monk. This was a sign of their close relationship. Of course. To us Sinlu, Gongzi is a true living bodhisattva, a great Buddha who has truly saved us. Gongzi, please accept our bow. With reddened eyes, the two pressed their palms together and insisted on bowing to Wang Chong once more. If they hadn't returned to Sinlu, they wouldn't have known what the situation was like there. Although Sinlu suffered from famine all year round, and people would die every year, there had never been so many deaths. Starving corpses, skeletons, and flies were everywhere. If not for Wang Chong's food, who knew how many more people would have died? The two of them had heartfelt respect for Wang Chong. He. Seeing how insistent the two monks were, Wang Chong knew that they weren't doing this for him but for the Sindhi. Thus, he didn't say anything else. Just from the expressions of the two, Wang Chong could tell that the situation in Sinlu had improved significantly. Since Sinlu's condition can be alleviated, that's good. However, great monk, it is better to teach a man to fish than to give him a fish. If Sinlu wants to break free from starvation, it can only rely on itself. What I can do is only a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. I can treat the symptoms, but not the root cause. Great monk, those who help themselves are helped by the heavens. In the end, Sinlu can only rely on itself. Wang Chong said. The relationship between him and Arloja and Ablanja was purely based on interests. However, Arloja and Ablanja's respect for him touched him a little, which was why he said those words. The famine in Sindhu wasn't a temporary one, but a perennial one. This wasn't without reason. In this transaction with Arloja and Ablanja, he had sent them a lot of rations, cows, goats, chickens, and ducks. If Sindhu was good at making use of the rations, they could just leave a portion of the rations to plant and raise the cows, goats, chickens, and ducks. The cows and goats could give birth next year, and the chickens and ducks could lay eggs. If the Sindhi were good at making use of the rations, the famine might be greatly alleviated, or if they were diligent enough, they might even be able to put an end to it. However, Wang Chong knew that it was impossible. The rations and livestock he had sent over would only be eaten up. The Sindhi high priest had only been thinking of treating the symptoms. As for treating the root cause, it probably wasn't within his considerations. This made Wang Chong recall a joke he had heard in the past. A neighbor saw that a man's family was so poor that he didn't know where his next meal would come from. Out of kindness, he wanted to help the man improve his family's circumstances and lift him out of poverty. Thus, he spent a huge sum of money to buy a cow that could give birth to calves for the man, urging him to let the cow graze well. When the cow gave birth next year, his life would become much better. In the beginning, the man also worked hard and made up his mind to change his past decadence and treat the cow well. He wanted to change his life and escape from poverty. However, he soon couldn't stand the hunger. Thinking that cows were more valuable than goats, he decided to sell the cow and buy a sheep. In any case, sheep could also give birth, and the extra money could be used to fill his stomach. However, out of worry for his neighbor, he struggled for a long time. In the end, he sold the cow and bought a sheep, and enjoyed a hearty meal. However, the money he earned from selling the cow and sheep was quickly spent. Thus, the man thought that since sheep were more valuable than chickens, and chickens could also lay eggs, he could sell the sheep for a chicken. With the extra money, he would be able to eat his fill. Unfamiliar the first time, but familiar the second time. This time, he didn't feel any psychological burden. On the third day, the chicken didn't lay eggs for half a day. In a panic, the man decided to kill the chicken and eat it. Thus, after going around for a while, the man's house was still empty, but the cow was gone. This was the situation that Sindhu was currently facing. No matter how many times they saved them, no matter how much food and livestock they gave them, they were still the same Sindhu, impoverished and weak. In the coming year, Sindhu would still face the weakening of the Tang dynasty, and the situation of starvation would continue. However, Wang Chong didn't intend to do anything. Those who fall behind will be beaten. If he wanted to change Sindhu's situation, he could only rely on Sindhu. No one else could help him. Arloja and Ablanadin had awkward looks on their faces. How could they not understand the problems that Sindhu faced? However, this was something that even the high priest was helpless against. All they could do was try their best. Let's not talk about this anymore. Fortunately, Wang Chong flung his sleeves and didn't dwell on this problem. Great monks, the reason why I called you here is because I have a matter to discuss with your high priest. Without beating around the bush, Wang Chong went straight to the point. He didn't summon Arloja and Ablanadin to show concern for the plight of the Sindhi people. Gongzi, please speak. The two immediately said respectfully. I wish to discuss a deal with your high priest regarding the Hyderabad ores. I wish to increase the quota of Hyderabad ores in the Central Plains. Great monks, please don't feel troubled. It won't be too late to reject it after hearing my words. Wang Chong looked at the awkward expressions on the faces of the two monks and smiled as he extended a finger. His expression was confident and calm, brimming with a power that could convince others. 1,000 gold taels. This is the price I am willing to pay for the Hyderabad ores. I believe that the high priest will not reject it. His voice was resounding and resounding. 1,000 gold taels. Arloja and Ablanadin, who were just about to reject it, were stunned. Gongzi, you aren't joking, right? Arloja's eyes widened in shock. He couldn't believe that Wang Chong was serious. This was because the price was much higher than the current price. Ha, of course I'm not joking. Wang Chong chuckled as he stood up from his seat. He exuded a maturity and steadiness that many people of his age lacked, as well as the aura of a leader that others could trust. When together with him, even Arloja and Ablanadin couldn't help but follow his lead. Even when listening to his words, they would pay full attention, afraid that they would miss out on any information he wanted to say. This was a completely involuntary process. At the start, it wasn't like this at all. In fact, the two of them even rejected Wang Chong. There's a reason why I'm offering a high price. I hope that the high priest will sell the largest amount of ores to me this year. Wang Chong raised a finger as he walked toward the duo. The annual production of ores in Hyderabad was very low. In other words, there was a quota. If one place supplied too much, another place would have a corresponding decrease. That's right. Wang Chong wanted to snatch the quotas of Arabia and Karak Spazinu. In his previous life, Arabia and Karak Spazinu relied on their heavily armored army equipped with Wuzi steel scimitars to win the war against the Tang dynasty in the western regions, single-handedly sending the most elite troops of the Tang dynasty to their deaths. Money makes the world go round. Wang Chong wanted to use his enormous wealth to forcefully snatch the quotas of Arabia and Karak Spasinu's Hyderabad ores and nip their Mamluks in the bud. The superior destroys the conspirators, while the subordinate destroys the soldiers. The most brilliant tactic was to subdue the enemy without fighting. Wang Chong didn't ask for an advance of 8 million from Li Qingyu just to play around, and even more so, not to become a millionaire. After deducting the 5 million required for the Lion City of Jiannan, the remaining 3 million was used by Wang Chong to snatch the quotas of Hyderabad ores from Arabia and strike at the Abbasid Caliphate and Karak Spazinu. War didn't necessarily have to be fought with swords and spears. Knocking out the claws and teeth of the other party was still a form of victory. More importantly, the Hyderabad ores project was like a rolling snowball. Finally, the time for Wang Chong to realize his ultimate ambition had arrived. Wang Chong wanted to make use of the huge sum of money he had accumulated from the Hyderabad ores project to build a heavily armored army of Wuzi steel. He wanted to make the Tang dynasty realize the long-cherished wish of his previous life. He wanted to make those fearsome weapons appear in the army of the Tang dynasty and lend them a helping hand. With his wisdom and strength, he wanted to help the Tang dynasty sweep away all the enemies who were eyeing him covetously. Wang Chong knew that the Sindis, including the high priest, would never be able to reject him. Because there was an irresistible temptation within. May I know how much ores Gongzi wants? Arayo, who had been silent all this while, asked. His expression was grim, and he seemed to be deep in thought. 1,000 gold taels. This was much higher than the price they had sold it to Wang Chong previously. However, the amount of ores in each region of Hyderabad was limited. Adding one region would inevitably affect another. This was a grave matter, and it wasn't something that he could make a decision on. He had to get to the bottom of this, then report to the high priest and let the high priest make the decision. 5,000 June. Chapter 286. Impossible. Arloja and Ablanja trembled and exclaimed at the same time. Perhaps realizing that they had lost their composure, Aloyo hurriedly explained. Gongzi, it's not that we don't want to sell, but we won't be able to excavate that much in an entire year. The Hyderabad ore was extremely tough, which meant that it was buried in an extremely harsh environment, making it extremely difficult to excavate. The Hyderabad ore wasn't an ordinary ore that could be found on the streets, and its output wasn't high. Even if they gathered all the resources from all the regions, they wouldn't be able to produce 5,000 jun of ore in an entire year. Then how much ore can Hyderabad produce in a year? Wang Chong placed his outstretched hand behind his back and asked with a smile. He naturally knew that the output of Hyderabad's ore wasn't that high. He was trying to figure out the true output of Hyderabad's ore so that he could decide how much he needed. 3,000 jun. That's the highest output we can estimate right now. And we'll only be able to reach it by the end of the year. If we want to reach the level you speak of, we'll have to increase our manpower and increase the output. Aloyo said seriously. Then why don't we increase the output? In the High Priest's plan, he should have added more manpower and increased production, right? Wang Chong said. But even so. That's a matter for next year. We won't be able to gather that much this year. Aloyo said gravely. The price of 1,000 gold taels per jun was really too high, it was too tempting. Moreover, it would be beneficial to Sindhu as well. But more importantly, Wang Chong's demand was too high, and Sindhu simply couldn't produce 5,000 jun, then we should be able to reach 1,000 jun, right? Wang Chong said with a smile. This was his true goal. If he was just talking to the two monks, he wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. But he was talking to the High Priest of Sindhu, and the one who could make the decision was the Sindhu High Priest that Wang Chong had never met before. The two monks were just his eyes and ears, so he naturally had to play some tricks. This should be barely enough. After a moment of silence, Aloyo finally nodded. However, it should take at least 2 more months. 2 months later, I should be able to gather the number you mentioned. Aloyo had been to the mines of Sindhu and was very familiar with the situation there. Wang Chong's 1,000 jun of ore was basically the limit of Sindhu's output this year. After selling 1,000 jun to Wang Chong, there wouldn't be much left for the year. After all, it was only a few months away from the end of the year. Besides, I can't make the decision on this matter. We still have to ask the High Priest. Arroyo said. In the end, as expected, Aloyo indicated that the final decision was still in the hands of the High Priest. Of course. Great monk, please tell the High Priest that as long as he agrees to my conditions, I can pay 1,000,000 taels of gold in advance. As Wang Chong spoke, he threw out his final bomb. There will always be brave men with great rewards. Arloja and Aloyo walked out of the gate of the Wang family in a trance. Wang Chong smiled with satisfaction as he looked at the shocked expressions on their faces and their dejected backs. 1,020,000 taels. This was more than 10 times more than the previous transaction. Just 90,000 taels of gold was enough to make Sindhu go wild with joy. Now, it was 1,000,000 taels of gold. To the famished Sindhu, this was an irresistible temptation. Wang Chong knew that his plan would definitely succeed. Even Arloja and Aloyo would do their best to persuade the Sindhu High Priest for the sake of Sindhu's interests. Gongzi, isn't this really worth it? 1,000,000 taels of gold isn't a small sum. Old Eagle said as he watched the backs of the two monks depart. Since he was going to follow Wang Chong and the Wang clan, he needed to understand his own clan. He also had some understanding of the Hyderabad ore. But 1,000,000 taels of gold was truly too much. Gold is just a type of metal. You'll understand in the future. Wang Chong chuckled, not bothering to explain. Zhang Shouji was helping to construct the Lion City in the southwest, Li Zhuxin was looking after Zhang Munian in Jiaoji, Solitary Wolf would represent him to negotiate with Zhang Wentua, and as for the Sindhu High Priest. Even though Wang Chong had never met the High Priest before, he was confident that the massive sum of 1,000,000 taels of gold would be enough to move the High Priest. The Arabs still hadn't grasped the forging technique for Wuxi steel, so it would be a waste even if they obtained the Hyderabad ore. Regardless of whether it was in terms of technology or wealth, they were no match for him. Everything was on the right track. He had finally accomplished something that he had never dared to imagine in his previous life. Once he was done with this matter, he would be able to return to the Kunwu training camp and focus on his martial arts. Right now, there's only that matter left. Wang Chong said to himself, a figure flitting through his mind. The reason why he was heading down the mountain this time was because Protector General Zhangqiu Jianqiong was entering the city. On the other hand, there was another matter that Wang Chong had on his mind that he wanted to investigate. It wasn't convenient for Wang Chong to do this while he was in the Kunwu training camp. However, with the backing of the Wang clan, it should be much easier for him to investigate this matter. The Eagle, how's the progress on the person I asked you to investigate? Is there any news? Wang Chong's voice was much softer than before. Ah! The Eagle subconsciously exclaimed. As if awakened from a dream, a serious expression appeared on his face. This was a request that Wang Chong had made after killing King Sojurim. Ever since he, Solitary Eagle, Steel Arms, and the others had sworn an oath to follow Wang Chong, this was the first time Wang Chong had asked him for a favor. Thus, the Eagle viewed this matter with great importance. Gongzi, I've asked my friends in the Bureau of Military Personnel and Bureau of Punishments to investigate that student from the Kunwu training camp, and they have a rough idea of his background. Gongzi's intuition isn't wrong. There's indeed something wrong with the information he left behind. Also, we've checked the place Gongzi mentioned. Even though we don't know what's going on, we can tell that this matter has something to do with Duke of Lu. Duke of Lu? Wang Chong was taken aback. He only knew that there was more to the matter than met the eye, but he didn't think that it would implicate someone of Duke of Lu's level. Are you certain? Wang Chong asked hesitantly. Not only so, I also discovered something that might interest Gongzi. Gongzi probably isn't aware of it, but not too long after you left the Kunwu training camp, that person left as well. The Eagle said. The more he looked into the matter, the more interested he became in that person. After following Wang Chong, the Eagle gradually realized that no matter how ordinary Wang Chong's arrangements might seem, they weren't as simple as they seemed. Oh! A glint flashed across Wang Chong's eyes. Back then, he was so focused on dealing with the Gogurians and King Sojurim that he didn't notice this matter. You mean to say that he's following me? Or is it just an accident, a coincidence? I've looked into it, and even though he left the Kunwu training camp together with Gongzi, he doesn't seem to have any interaction with Gongzi in the capital. It's likely to be a coincidence. The Eagle said. Even if Wang Chong hadn't asked about this matter, he would have told him anyway. Even though it hadn't been long since he took over that young man's matter, the Eagle was already interested in the matter that Wang Chong had arranged for him. On top of that, that young man is extremely alert. It isn't easy to find him amidst the complicated architecture of the capital. However, after sending a few nightingales to patrol the surroundings of the Duke of Lu residence, I did discover something interesting. The Duke of Lu residence hasn't been peaceful recently. A masked fellow has been loitering around the residence late at night, seemingly intent on doing something. At the end, the Eagle couldn't help but chuckle. Oh! Hearing the bizarre laughter of the Eagle, Wang Chong fell into deep thought. You mean to say that, Gongzi, you'll know once you take a look. The Eagle smiled. There were many dukes in the Tang dynasty, and these dukes came from all over the world. The reasons for their conferment varied as well, and it was extremely complicated. Some were conferred their titles due to their outstanding contributions in the war, some were conferred their titles due to their high prestige, some were conferred their titles due to their contributions to the emperor, some were conferred their titles due to their meritorious service to the emperor, saving a certain emperor in a certain era, or having in-laws with the royal family. In any case, the Tang dynasty had conferred quite a few dukes in the past 200 years. Of which, a portion of them enjoyed the patronage of their fathers and bore the title of duke, but they were already in name only. They no longer possessed the ability to discuss politics with the emperor, but the royal court still favored them, granting them the salary and treatment of a duke. The Duke of Lu was such an existence. Moreover, the dukes were divided into different ranks according to their different rights. The Duke of Lu enjoyed the lowest tier of salary, a county-level salary. The Duke of Lu had inherited the title for 3 generations, and his existence had become extremely inconspicuous. Basically, no one in the royal court would pay attention to him unless there was something special going on. 4 towering walls stood tall, forming a circle. Surrounding the walls were tall and lush maple trees. Behind the high walls was a luxurious, tall and straight mansion. This was the Duke of Lu residence. In the dead of the night, the forest was silent, save for the occasional chirping of birds. In the darkness, the 2 rows of red lanterns hanging by the entrance of the Duke of Lu residence were exceptionally eye-catching. The eagle, are you sure that he will come tonight? In the forest, Wang Chong, who was hidden in the canopy, asked the eagle. The duo had been waiting here for quite some time now, but they didn't see anything. Hehe, Gongzi, don't worry. I've observed him, and he comes around this time every day. He should be done scouting the area over the past few days, and it's about time for him to make a move. The eagle chuckled. Chio. Chio. Just as they were speaking, a chirping sound suddenly sounded above their heads. A small bird the size of a wicker basket leaped happily above their heads. It's here. Upon seeing this ordinary bird, the eagle's heart leaped in joy, and it suddenly chirped softly. Who? Almost at the same time, a gust of wind blew, and a masked figure suddenly appeared. It was the person whom the eagle spoke of. Chapter 287. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. The tranquil night suddenly turned eerie with the appearance of the assassin. That person stood outside the high wall, looking very vigilant. He did not rush in, but stood outside the forest, slowly looking around. Wang Chong had seen his fair share of assassins. Be it Arab assassins, Goguryeo assassins, or even Mayase Mayaka, the female assassin from Yingzhou. None of them felt as bizarre as the assassin before him. He was simply too calm. It wasn't the calmness that came from a major event, but a calmness that stemmed from his very bones. No matter what he did, he would do it slowly and calmly. Even if a blade was pressed against his neck, he would still face death calmly. Wang Chong had only seen such disposition on a single person. I wonder if it's really him. A thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind, and he recalled a certain person on White Tiger Peak. Even though the eagle had been hinting that the other party was that person, he hadn't seen the other party's face yet, so he couldn't confirm it. Furthermore, there was a slight difference in his physique. It was hard to tell if the other party was a completely different person or if he had used some kind of movement technique to alter his movements. As the distance was too close, Wang Chong and the eagle didn't dare to get careless. They lowered their bodies and held their breaths, lowering their presence to the minimum. Wang Chong even used the tortoise breathing art to seal all of his pores so that not a single sound could be heard. Wang! Just as the duo was holding their breaths, an abrupt change occurred. An intense feeling of being watched rose in their hearts, and their hearts shuddered. This is bad. He has noticed us. Through the dense foliage, Wang Chong and the eagle noticed a pair of sharp eyes staring in their direction at the same time. That piercing gaze made the duo feel as though they were completely exposed. That fellow is way too wary. Wang Chong immediately felt that something was amiss. With tortoise breathing, even a profound martial realm expert would find it hard to notice him as long as he closed his pores. The eagle, on the other hand, was an expert close to the profound martial realm. He didn't expect to be discovered. Young master, wait. Suddenly, an arm reached out from behind. The eagle's expression was solemn as he grabbed Wang Chong from behind. His eyes clearly conveyed this message. Wang Chong was startled. Just as he was feeling astonished, he suddenly heard the crisp cry of a bird. Chirp chirp. Chirp chirp. The sound was very close, jumping around, not far from the top of their heads. It was the little bird that the eagle kept. In a flash, Wang Chong understood what the eagle meant. The person was not looking at them, but at the little bird trained by the eagle above their heads. Chirp chirp. Chirp chirp. The little bird seemed to be able to understand the eagle's intentions. After jumping between the branches a few times, it suddenly flapped its wings and soared into the sky. Soon, it disappeared into the night sky. Outside the high walls, the pair of eyes watched as the little bird disappeared into the night sky. Slowly, the gaze turned gentle. At the same time, the alertness in Wang Chong's heart also gradually disappeared. Impressive. Wang Chong looked at the direction where the little bird disappeared and praised in his heart. The eagle's ability to train birds was simply unparalleled. Regardless of the size of the bird, from giant eagles and condors to the common sparrows, pigeons, orioles, he could train all kinds of birds and make them work for him. This was also the reason why Wang Chong valued the eagle so much that he decided to hand over some of the Wang family's information channels to him. Among Steel Arms, Solitary Wolf, and the other two, he was the weakest. However, his ability to train birds was also the best. No matter how powerful an expert was, they would never imagine that those common birds by the roadside would be someone else's eyes and ears. So, on the other side, after confirming that the surroundings were safe, the black-clothed man leaped high into the air, and as agile as a monkey, he silently disappeared into the high walls of the Duke of Lu residence. Gongzi, should we follow him in? The eagle turned around and asked with a hushed voice. Of course. Are the preparations done on your side? Wang Chong turned around and smiled. Hee, this isn't my first day taming birds. Gongzi, don't worry, I have already prepared all of the birds in the Duke of Lu residence. No matter where he goes, we will be able to keep track of him. Old Eagle knew what he was asking and faintly smiled, a hint of pride on his face. It wasn't his first day taming birds, so naturally, he couldn't just train that little bird. Ever since he failed to investigate King Sojurim's case back then, and all of his methods were discovered by the Gogurians, he had endured the humiliation for the past decade and worked hard. His bird taming techniques were no longer the same as they were back then. Now, he was no longer limited to those common eagles and eagles that could fly high. Now, even the birds that were commonly seen in the bushes on the side of the road could be used by him to scout for information. Even the most formidable of experts wouldn't be able to think of such a possibility. So. The duo leaped down from the tree, and with a leap, they silently leaped onto the city walls in the direction where the black-clothed man had disappeared. Within the high walls, there were rows upon rows of pavilions, terraces, and pavilions. There were also gardens, ponds, and rockery, all of which were connected in the darkness. And in just a short moment, the black-clothed man had already disappeared. There. The eagle's eyes lit up. With a hushed voice, he suddenly pointed to a gazebo in the distance. Following the eagle's gaze, Wang Chong saw a blurry silhouette flashing by. If not for his sharp eyes, he wouldn't have noticed it at all. What in the world is that fellow doing? Wang Chong gazed into the distance in contemplation. That fellow didn't seem to have a specific target. Instead, he seemed to be searching for something. Gongzi, should we chase after him? The eagle glanced at the city walls and asked. Even though he didn't wield any actual authority, he was still a duke of the royal court. There were still quite a few guards in the residence, and there was a high chance that he would be discovered. On top of that, the masked lad was also extremely alert. It wouldn't be easy to follow him without being discovered. Standing on top of the wall, Wang Chong fell into deep thought. Let's go down and take a look. In any case, I must find out whether that person is him or not today. Also, why would he come to a duke's residence in the middle of the night? Wang Chong said. He had to get to the bottom of this matter before returning to the Kunwu training camp. This was the final matter he had to understand. As for the danger, he wasn't afraid even if he was discovered by the Duke of Lu. Let's go. Leaping down from the city walls, the duo discreetly headed in the direction of the masked man. At this moment, the birds that the eagle had reared played an important role. Even without following the masked man, the duo was able to keep track of his movements. That fellow is too daring. What is he looking for? The masked man's movements were erratic, sometimes to the east and sometimes to the west. As he tailed the masked man, even the eagle was astonished. After all, this was a duke's residence, and after many years of accumulation, there were still some formidable experts in it. Even the eagle and Wang Chong had to tread carefully here in case they were discovered by anyone from the Duke of Lu residence, needless to say, anyone else. But the masked man didn't have the slightest bit of apprehension. Based on his observations over the past few days, the masked man seemed to have a thorough understanding of this place. He knew when the guards would be changing shifts, where the guards would go, and where they would go. It was as if he was a member of the Duke of Lu residence. But the eagle knew that it was impossible for that to be the case. Along the way, he had seen the masked man entering and exiting the bathhouse, the drawing room, the guest room, the main hall, the garden. Other than the Duke of Lu's residence, which was heavily guarded, the masked man had entered almost everything else in the Duke of Lu residence. His footsteps were silent, and his expression was frighteningly calm. In the darkness of the night, he seemed no different from a specter, leaving one shivering in fear. All of a sudden, the eagle froze. His gaze was fixated on the area before him. What's wrong? Following beside the eagle, Wang Chong immediately noticed that something was amiss. Over there. He entered the residence of the son of the Duke of Lu. The eagle was taken aback. What? Wang Chong hadn't realized what was going on yet. That's the residence of the son of the Duke of Lu. The eagle stared ahead. Wang Chong's body trembled violently, and he abruptly turned his head around. In the darkness, through the arched roof, he could see a brightly lit room in the distance. Unlike the other areas of the Duke of Lu residence that had been plunged into darkness, this room was extremely eye-catching. Wang Chong finally understood the eagle's intentions. Most people dressed in black would try their best to avoid places with open flames. However, this person didn't seem to have such qualms. But this wasn't what Wang Chong was concerned about. Eagle, are you sure that that is the residence of the son of the Duke of Lu? Wang Chong asked grimly. The eagle nodded. Gongzi, do you want to take a look? Unexpectedly, the eagle thought that Wang Chong would agree with his suggestion. But contrary to his expectations, Wang Chong's face suddenly warped. Let's go. This is a trap. If we don't leave now, it'll be too late. What? The eagle was astonished. How could this be? The sparrows he had trained had been in the vicinity all this while, and they hadn't noticed any traps at all. Why would Wang Chong say that this was a trap? But Wang Chong didn't explain at all. After saying those words, he immediately leaped forward and dashed out. The eagle hesitated for a moment, but eventually, he still decided to follow. The duo swiftly retraced their steps, leaped over the high walls, and left the Duke of Lu residence. Gongzi, what is going on? In the forest beyond the high walls, the eagle asked as soon as he landed on the ground. Eagle, things aren't that simple. I don't know if the men from the Duke of Lu residence have noticed you, but they have definitely noticed him. Regardless of what he is looking for or whether he is targeting the son of the Duke of Lu, he won't be able to get anything out of this trip. Wang Chong said grimly. His thoughts were too simplistic. The Duke of Lu had already fallen from grace, and he didn't even have the right to discuss politics in the royal court. Only during the Lantern Festival would he be invited to the royal palace to have a meal with the scions. But how could a duke of the Tang dynasty be simple? Chapter 288. So. Not too long after the duo left the Duke of Lu residence, a commotion could be heard from behind the walls. This sudden movement immediately attracted the attention of the two people. Gongzi, there's movement. That person has left the Duke of Lu residence. The eagle reported. As he spoke, the eagle couldn't help but glance at Wang Chong in astonishment. He knew that Wang Chong was right. Not bad. His reaction is indeed fast to realize that something is amiss so quickly. Hearing those words, a hint of surprise flashed across Wang Chong's eyes. He had just left the Duke of Lu residence, but he had already left the area. There weren't many people who could match up to his sharpness. Let's go and take a look. Without any hesitation, Wang Chong beckoned the eagle, and the two of them headed in the direction where the masked man had left. So. A cold gust of wind blew, and in the direction opposite of where Wang Chong and the others had entered the Duke of Lu residence, there was a flash of light, and a masked man leaped out from behind the walls. The masked man's hands were hidden within his sleeves, and he clenched them tightly. His face was pale, but he didn't say a single word. Only deep hatred could be seen in his eyes. Without a doubt, his operation had failed. So. After leaving the Duke of Lu residence, the black-clothed masked man swiftly dashed into the distance. Humph. Brat, are you still thinking of leaving? A cold sneer sounded, and a light flashed in the forest. A figure suddenly appeared from the side, blocking the path of the masked man. The masked man's face darkened, and just as he was about to turn around, another figure leaped out from the other side of the forest, blocking the masked man's path. Humph. I already told you to stay behind, so where do you think you're going? That muscular figure walked out from the ambush, but he wasn't in a hurry to attack. Instead, he slowly surrounded the masked man to prevent him from escaping. Even though the masked man was dressed in black and had a mask covering his face, the figures on both sides were sneering coldly, as if they had seen through his disguise. Humph, aren't you going to speak? Do you think you can hide your identity by not speaking? The fierce-looking man in the lead laughed coldly and continued to press forward. Let me tell you, you might be able to hide your identity from others, but you won't be able to fool Gongzi and the old master. Kid, from the very beginning, Master knew that you would come here sooner or later. Hearing this, a slight change finally appeared in the masked man's eyes, but there was even more extreme coldness and hatred. Hee, if you were in the Kunwa training camp, we wouldn't be able to do anything to you. But it's a pity that you survivors refused to give up and actually walk right into my trap. The burly man in the lead sneered. Buzz. Hearing the sturdy man's words, the masked man's complexion suddenly changed. His eyes were slightly red, and an extremely cold aura was released from his body. He was like the most ferocious beast, dangerous and terrifying. In the beginning, the leader of the group was still calm and unruffled, looking down from above like a cat toying with a mouse. But under the pressure of the masked man, he felt as though he had swallowed 100 flies, and he felt extremely uncomfortable. Brat, you still dare to look at me with such eyes? You really don't know what's good for you. Since that's the case, don't blame me for this. Brothers, come out. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Like some kind of signal, in an instant, the front, back, left, right of the black-clothed masked man. Like ghosts appearing out of thin air, they suddenly walked out of their hiding places with malicious intentions and surrounded the black-clothed masked man. Screech. Not far from the top of the forest, a clear and resonant cry came from a place not far above the forest. A cat-like adult eagle spread its iron wings and gently glided down from the sky. Right, I forgot to tell you. No matter which direction you flee in, you won't be able to escape. So, you should just give up. The leader of the group said coldly, as though he was looking at a prey trapped in a cage. He tore off a piece of jerky and tossed it over. The ferocious bird caught it, and with a sharp cry, it flapped its wings and quickly flew up, disappearing into the night sky. Watching the giant eagle disappear into the night sky, the black-clothed masked man suddenly understood something, but his cold eyes did not show any expression. Clang! Slowly taking a few steps back, the masked man in black pulled out a sword with a clang, showing his attitude with his actions. "You're courting death." The leader of the group flew into a rage. He waved his hand, and an expert with a majestic aura leaped out with a sneer. "My lord, there's no need for so many people to deal with this brat. Just let me do it." Before he finished speaking, he swung his sword. Boom! A majestic gust of stellar energy erupted from his body like a raging torrent. But something shocking happened. Almost at the same moment that the expert made his move, the masked man suddenly leaped forward, charging toward the expert instead of retreating. Boom! Right before everyone's eyes, a powerful surge of stellar energy suddenly burst forth from the masked man's body. Along with this surge of stellar energy was a dazzling black halo. Boom boom! Dust and pebbles flew in all directions, and shockwaves of energy shot into the surroundings. As though two ferocious beasts, the two stellar energy surges collided with one another in midair, and a strong gale whipped up, causing the surrounding trees to rustle noisily. Ah! Before anyone could comprehend what was going on, a shrill scream of agony echoed in the air. The battle outside the forest came to an end in a short moment. The sword in the masked man's hand was knocked several zhang away. The expert from the Duke of Lu residence had pierced his right chest, and the tip of the sword was protruding from his back. On the other hand, the masked man's palms pierced deeply into the chest of the expert from the Duke of Lu residence. His eyes were as cold as ever. Deathly silence. The surroundings suddenly fell deathly silent. The gleeful expression on everyone's faces vanished, and in that instant, everyone felt a bone-chilling chill. For the first time, everyone felt a chilling power coming from this young man who had his head hidden and face masked with a black cloth and had not spoken a single word since the beginning. No one had ever seen such a ferocious fighting style before. Even at the cost of severe injuries, he was determined to kill his opponent. Even though the masked man was severely injured, everyone knew that he had lost. That was because he had paid the price with his life. Puchi. Outside the forest, the masked man calmly withdrew his hands, and the expert from the Duke of Lu residence collapsed to the ground as though a wooden pillar with his eyes wide open. The black masked man's attack had not only pierced his chest with his hands, but it had also crushed his heart in his chest. Kill him. Seeing this scene, the burly man in the lead had a ferocious look on his face as he suddenly pounced forward to kill. This time, it wasn't just one person. Everyone made a move. Gongzi, hurry. Their battle is getting more and more intense. The eagle said. Even though he couldn't see anything at all, he had many birds to relay news for him. Even though he wasn't present at the scene, he felt as though he was witnessing it with his own eyes. There are quite a few of them. Furthermore, they are moving swiftly toward the northwest. The target is injured. Another group of people is coming. Amidst the darkness, the eagle led the way and reported the situation to Wang Chong. Honestly speaking, even though he had seen the eagle train, he didn't understand a single word of the eagle's unique language. Occasionally, he would only see a small bird flying in front of him, jumping, chirping, circling, or flapping its wings. In Wang Chong's eyes, these were ordinary movements of birds, but in the eyes of the eagle, it was the rich language of birds. It was through this language that Wang Chong and the eagle were able to keep a clear target in their pursuit. There's another eagle. The eagle's footsteps suddenly paused. I was too careless. I didn't expect Duke of Lu to be prepared and even hide an eagle in his residence. Gongzi, you are probably right on this matter. This is indeed a trap. To think that Duke of Lu would know that someone would be coming. The eagle sneered coldly. He was an eagle. He had spent his entire life interacting with all kinds of birds. Before doing anything, he would first sweep the skies to see if there were any eyes and ears of others. This was a common practice on the battlefield, but the eagle still managed to do it. Thus, the eagle was certain that there wasn't such an eagle in the vicinity of the Duke of Lu residence before this incident. This eagle that suddenly appeared was from the Duke of Lu residence. To hide an eagle before the incident even happened, and then release it to chase after its prey. This matter was getting more and more bizarre. The eagle realized that this matter was completely different from what he had imagined. There's no need to hold him back. Kill that eagle. Wang Chong understood the meaning behind the eagle's words, and he said calmly. If the other party had an eagle in the sky, that person wouldn't be able to escape. On top of that, the other party had an eagle, and that person would be exposed. Also, send the signal. Wang Chong said. Yes, Gongzi. Old Eagle chuckled, a delighted expression on his face. Reaching his right hand into his left sleeve, Old Eagle took out a miniature golden bird. The bird's body was curled up, and its eyes were bright. The feathers on its body seemed as though they would shoot out at any moment. With a single look, it was clear that this wasn't an ordinary bird. Wang Chong had been in contact with the eagle for quite some time now, but he didn't know that the latter had such a bird on him. He felt that the eagle had many secrets. Yi! The golden bird suddenly opened its beak and let out a cry. The sound it produced was so loud that it was completely disproportionate to its size. With a leap, it flew out from the eagle's hand. Even Wang Chong didn't see how it disappeared. Chapter 289. There are bloodstains on the ground. There was a fight here. Outside the forest where the masked man fought, Wang Chong and the eagle came to a halt. There was a huge amount of blood on the ground, and there were signs of a fight everywhere. The ground was riddled with holes, and quite a few trees had been broken. Wood shavings were flying all over the place. Not only was there a fight, someone even died. There's too much blood here. This isn't a normal loss of blood. The eagle stood up and glanced at the clear human-shaped mark on the ground a few steps away. This wasn't a normal situation. It was caused by human blood splattering on the ground. Judging from the amount of blood loss, even if the other party wasn't dead, he was probably on the verge of death. They have already dragged the corpse away. Wang Chong nodded in agreement with the eagle's judgment. The men from the Duke of Lu residence seemed to be intending to conceal this matter, so they dragged the corpse away as soon as possible. However, due to the lack of time and the fact that they had to chase after the other party, they didn't have the time to clean up the bloodstains and signs of a fight. Suddenly, a glint flashed across Wang Chong's eyes, and he leaped to the edge of the forest. He squatted down, and when he stood up once more, there was a black cloth in his hand. It belongs to that lad. The eagle also walked over, and upon seeing the blood seeping out of the cloth, his eyes were filled with worry. That lad is vomiting blood. It seems like his injuries aren't light. He was on the verge of developing feelings for the fellow who snuck into the Duke of Lu residence in the middle of the night. Not to mention, the Gongzi had instructed him to investigate the other party. Even though he wasn't sure why the Gongzi wanted him to investigate the other party, the eagle could sense that the other party was a friend and not a foe. Wang Chong didn't say a word. Holding the blood-soaked cloth in his hand, he fell into deep thought. Let's go. Tossing aside the black cloth that reeked of blood, Wang Chong immediately dashed forward. He was getting more and more curious about the relationship between that fellow and the Duke of Lu residence. That fellow left the Kunwa training camp and came to the Duke of Lu residence in the middle of the night. For several days, he seemed to be searching for something. Just what in the world would belong to the Duke of Lu residence? There was also Duke of Lu. His attitude toward that person was completely unlike that of a thief who had infiltrated his residence in the middle of the night. He seemed to have known about the man's plan before he made his move. He had prepared a trap in advance, a giant eagle hibernating in the mansion, and a team of experts who would follow his orders at any time and would pursue him to the death. If there was no ulterior motive, was there a need to treat a nameless person like this? They hurriedly dodged, but no one dared to step forward. Everyone knew that the lad was severely injured, and he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. This included the brothers who had already fallen to the ground. But more importantly, every time that lad seemed to be on the verge of death, he would be as lively as a dragon and a tiger when they stepped forward to attack him. He would fight with his life on the line, killing one brother after another. It wasn't that no one had ever seen someone with the nickname, Desperate Swordsman, before. But there had never been anyone like him. This wasn't just a simple case of him being ferocious, but one that didn't fear death at all. There was no such thing as feigning civility when fighting with him. From the very start, he would fight with his life on the line, knowing that it was either life or death. Every time that lad seemed to be at the end of his rope, he would risk his life to be pierced through, and his internal organs would be blasted before killing his opponent in a single blow. Furthermore, he would stab his hands into the other party's body and kill them in such a chilling manner. At this point in the battle, everyone already understood that his sharpest weapon was not his saber or sword, but his pair of fists. On top of that, those brothers who thought that he was on the verge of death were all lying on the ground. Under such circumstances, no one dared to dissuade him. Bastard! The brawny man flew into a rage. Swoosh, he drew the saber by his waist and was just about to make a move when he suddenly heard a loud shout. Gongzi is here, Gongzi is here. In an instant, everyone felt as though they had received a decree. Under the starry night sky, a silhouette dressed in a long white robe with a gloomy face could be seen. He was accompanied by a few experts who had obviously surpassed the true martial realm and was flying over. Even from a distance away, everyone could feel the powerful aura of nobility emanating from that person. He was the heir of the Duke of Lu residence, Li Bing. Move aside. With a livid face, Li Bing leaped down from the treetop. Walala. In an instant, everyone opened up a path for the heir of the Duke of Lu residence. Behind him, two experts with profound gazes and unfathomable cultivation also flew down and stuck close to him. Under the tree, the pale-faced young man looked like a piece of paper. When he saw the two experts of the Xian Qi layer behind Li Bing, his expression finally fluctuated and his eyes dimmed. Humph. The eldest son of the Duke of Lu residence, Li Bing, was in his 20s. He had a well-built body, and he seemed to possess a domineering aura. As soon as he appeared, the people around him naturally followed his lead. Su Hanshan, I don't care how smart you think you are. Since you have changed your name, I'll call you that for the time being. Li Bing said coldly, revealing the name of the young man. The black-clothed and masked man who had barged into the Duke of Lu residence in the middle of the night was no other than Su Hanshan, who shared the same room with Wang Chong on White Tiger Peak in the Kunwa training camp. If you had just obediently stayed in the Kunwa training camp to be your Su Hanshan, I wouldn't have bothered with you. However, since you dared to barge into my Duke of Lu residence, don't blame me for what happens next. Beneath the tree, Su Hanshan sat on the ground silently as he stared coldly at the eldest son of the Duke of Lu, Li Bing. Retribution comes in the cycle of the heavens. Li Bing, one day, you and your Duke of Lu residence will pay the price for what you did back then. Su Hanshan suddenly said. After saying those words, he immediately regained his composure and closed his eyes silently, awaiting death. You're courting death. Those words completely infuriated Li Bing. Since you're so eager to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Kill him. Wang. As soon as Li Bing finished his words, the profound martial realm expert behind Li Bing suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed at Su Hanshan, who was standing under the tree. Under the starry night, his 5 fingers emanated a cold glint reminiscent of swords. Stop! At this crucial moment, a voice suddenly echoed from the forest, attracting everyone's attention except for the profound martial realm expert behind Li Bing. Hong Long. At the crucial moment, a figure dashed into the battlefield like a tiger in a flock of sheep. At the moment of imminent peril, he stood in front of Su Hanshan and blocked this sure-kill move. Who is it? The faces of the two profound martial realm experts turned cold as they turned their gazes over. Who is it? At the same time, Li Bing's gaze also turned to the forest. At this moment, there shouldn't be anyone else here. Brother Su, are you alright? Wang Chong walked out from the forest and glanced at Su Hanshan, who seemed to have died once, with an awful complexion. Even though he had tried to stop Su Hanshan, it was futile against the experts around Li Bing. If not for the eagle, Su Hanshan probably wouldn't have been able to save Su Hanshan. Who in the world are you? What relationship do you have with that fellow? Staring at Wang Chong, Li Bing's complexion was even more awful than Wang Chong's. The fellow lying on the ground was of great importance. The Duke of Lu residents had spent a long time waiting for him to walk right into their trap and capture him. In fact, he had even led a team here personally. This matter couldn't be allowed to go wrong. In fact, he couldn't allow anyone else to see it. This person was completely out of his expectations. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.